The scene opens at an academy's entrance exam, where a lone figure steps into the arena. In a flash, he blows the mind of the world's legendary sword goddess, because the instant the match starts, he's already standing directly behind the proctor. Before anyone can blink, Gray's blade sings through the air, and the examiner is down in a single flawless strike. That one move awakens a feeling the sword goddess has never known, the desperate urge to take on a disciple. She senses an immense mysterious power radiating from Gray, buried deep within him. But here's the secret. This isn't his first rodeo. In a previous life, Gray had already reached the absolute zenith of swordsmanship, all on his own. He was the man who once wounded humanity's greatest foe. But even then, Gray fatally underestimated the Purger's true strength. In the end, a single, devastating attack pierced straight through his heart. Gray was certain his story had ended right there. Yet, in the very next second, he finds himself adrift in a strange, ethereal space, where he meets a being calling himself Kronos, the god of time. Kronos drops a bombshell. The dormant power inside Gray is even greater than the Purger's. It just has yet to be unleashed. For that very reason, the god of time is giving Gray a do-over, a chance to be reborn. With all his memories and a soul that's been seriously buffed, the timeline resets to zero, and the entire world's destiny is now resting squarely on his shoulders. When Gray's eyes snap open, he's lying in a field of green grass. Just a short distance away is his old hometown, the village of Ronaldo. The shock hits him like a tidal wave. He's actually back in the past. At that same moment, a sharp pain flares up in his arm. Glancing down, he recognizes the scar instantly, a souvenir from when his bully Beard used to push him around. He makes a silent vow he will never again be weak enough to lose to trash like that. Because in 10 years, the Purge will descend on this world again. And when that day arrives, not a single person will be able to stand against it. But he clings to what the god of time told him, that his real power eclipses theirs. It just needs a wake-up call. As Gray gets ready to head back to the village and plot his next move, he runs smack into Beard, the very punk who made his life a living hell. Turns out they'd been searching everywhere for him. They never imagined he'd be hiding out in the forest. Without warning, Beard tosses a sword at Gray's feet, demanding a spar right then and there. The message is clear: fight, or you're not going anywhere. Gray, completely unfazed, coldly replies that his injuries haven't healed yet. We can go around when I'm recovered. But Beard just scoffs. Don't be a baby. These are just shield swords. They're perfectly safe. The words barely leave his lips before Beard lunges, swinging wildly. For Gray, the attack is almost pathetically easy to sidestep. After the countless life-or-death battles of his past, Beard's movements look like they're in slow motion. The sight leaves the bully's cronies completely stunned. Since when did this loser get so fast? Gray glides backward, creating distance as he scoops the other sword off the ground. If Beard is this desperate for a beatdown, Gray is more than happy to oblige. The moment Gray's fingers close around the hilt, Beard charges in again. In one fluid motion, Gray counters, sending Beard's weapon flying from his grasp. Beard just freezes his mind, refusing to process what happened. He tells himself it was a fluke, just dumb luck. That's when Gray cracks a smile, a dangerous fire igniting in his eyes, and calmly echoes Beard's earlier words. Don't worry, shield swords are safe. With that, he unleashes a vicious slash. Even with a blunted practice sword, a bloody wound tears across Beard's shoulder. The shock and pain send him crumpling to his knees. He clutches the injury as blood streams through his fingers. It's all going exactly as Gray envisioned. Before Beard can even scream, Gray smacks the flat of the blade right across his mouth. The crack is sickening as several of Beard's teeth go flying. Trembling with absolute terror, Beard stammers, "How did you get so strong?" In a full-blown panic, Beard screams at his buddies to jump Gray all at once. In less than 2 seconds, they have a new plan. This guy is a freak now. Get him from behind. A moment later, Gray is completely surrounded. He lets out a short, unimpressed laugh. "You guys really want a piece of this too?" he asks. They don't reply. They just rush him from all directions. Gray sneers. He was actually considering letting them walk away. They just threw away their one and only chance. 10 minutes later, every single one of them is face down in the dirt. The very people Gray once feared are now utterly broken at his feet. If he remembers correctly, these chumps are from the Celia Sword Dojo. Yep, he's right. They thought they were hot stuff. So they recently quit training. The idea almost makes Gray laugh out loud. With skills this pathetic, they actually believed they were powerful. Still, that dojo is useless for his own growth, but there's one thing Gray knows for sure. He's going to need to make use of that place down the line. Gray's never set foot in the dojo, but he remembers that you need a recommendation to get in. Beard starts pleading, telling Gray to ask someone else, whining that if his master finds out he lost, he'll be absolutely destroyed. Gray's only response is a casual swing of his sword, a silent, ice-cold command for Beard to shut up, and does precisely what he's told. The blade zips through the air, splitting a leaf perfectly in two, right before Beard's unbelieving eyes. A split second later, Beard scrambles forward, desperately offering a tour of the dojo. It's this way, he insists, ready to guide Gray there immediately. As they walk, Beard just has to ask why a guy with Gray's insane skills would even bother showing up. He clearly doesn't need to train here. Gray lays it out simply: the dojo holds a recommendation ticket for the academy, and that alone makes the entire visit worth it. Someone else nearby scoffs, saying that even for the academy, a powerhouse like Gray has no real need to attend. Those words send Gray spiraling into a memory. If his current strength were really enough, he wouldn't be here. But the truth is, it's not even close. Even the world's most elite squad was annihilated by a single attack from the Purger, right after they had unleashed that mysterious power. The moment the Purger got serious, Gray couldn't even lay a scratch on him. He has no idea how godlike he needs to become to actually take the Purger down. But in that critical moment, even for just a flash, Gray had command of that dark energy. It was the very thing that briefly crowned him the strongest sword god. Even so, his core focus has always been the sword arts, inherited from the Sword Saint. If he could level up multiple sword paths under the same intense conditions, the same way he mastered his blade, maybe his power could evolve into something entirely new. Becoming a sword god with borrowed dark power was just a temporary flex. His own foundation was still way too fragile. This, Gray realizes, is the real mission from Kronos, the god of time. Soon after, Gray stands before the dojo, where the person in charge is waiting. She offers a formal apology for her student's behavior, explaining that the clowns who messed with him have already been kicked out. She refuses to let people under her roof act so disgracefully. Gray cuts straight to the chase. He heard this place, hands out academy recommendations, and he came to claim one. Hearing this, the woman's hand moves slowly, unsheathing her sword. She's willing to write the letter, but first she needs to personally verify Gray's power. She tells him to take the first shot, attack whenever he's ready. Gray doesn't waste a second. The instant she finishes speaking, he vanishes, and in less than 3 seconds, their blades have clashed over a dozen times. A quiet gasp escapes the dojo master. There's something deeply unsettling about this kid. For someone so young to possess such a brutally efficient fighting style, it's like he survived 100 life-or-death battles. That fact alone proves Beard and his crew never had a chance. Beyond that, she can tell Gray's style is mostly homegrown, but she spots glimmers of academy techniques woven within. Who on earth trained him? Ultimately, the dojo master comes to a stunning realization. Gray's swordsmanship is raw, but his raw talent is off the charts. A smirk plays on her lips. He's a diamond in the rough, and she's just the person to polish him. A moment later, she decides the sparring match is over. It's a shame, but she's about to end this. But what she doesn't get is that Gray is already 10 steps ahead, having completely read her next move and baiting her counterattack. In the next flash, Gray unleashes his own power, sending her sword spinning out of her grip, a look of pure, unadulterated shock plastering her face. From that point on, no matter what attack she throws, Gray parries it effortlessly. The dojo master's mind is reeling. Why isn't he backing down? How is he perfectly matching her every move? What began as a simple skill check has now forced her to fight with everything she's got, and for the first time, a chilling thread of fear wraps around her heart, a feeling she never thought she'd experience here. At that same moment, Gray lifts his sword, and a faint, ominous aura begins to swirl around him. He's unconsciously starting to tap into that power. The instant the dojo master lunges, Gray's blade cuts through the air, trailing a phantom slash of dark energy. She knows instantly she can't block that. Her survival instincts scream as she throws herself backward, a terrifying sense of doom washing over her. Meanwhile, Gray's unintentional power surge leaves his body critically drained. Seeing the opening, the dojo master lunges forward to finish the fight. That bone-deep feeling of danger was legit. She just hadn't grasped how real it was without taking the hit directly. But as her weapon descends, her expression shatters into disbelief. Her sword is already in 2 pieces. The scariest part, she didn't even see it happen. It's only then that Gray understands what he did. His last attack had already sliced the dojo master's wooden sword clean in half. If she had followed through with her charge, it wouldn't be the sword that was split. It would have been her skull. Gray is just as stunned. He just used that insane, mysterious power from his past life all over again. The very next second, his vision whites out, his legs buckle, and he collapses to his knees, right in front of the horrified dojo master. The brutal truth is undeniable. His current body can't handle that kind of juice. Gray forces himself back onto his feet, brushing it off like he's okay. For a hot second, he thinks about telling her about the power. I mean, in his eyes, the dojo master is a legit beast, but he immediately shuts that idea down. He could try to explain, but she'd never buy it. Hell, he can't even get a handle on this power himself. Letting out a nervous chuckle, Gray tries to play it cool, saying he just got a little too hyped. But the dojo master is staring down at the splintered sword in her hand, her expression grim. This entire situation was straight up impossible. Her wooden sword was shattered by a shield blade, and she knows Gray is acutely aware of what he just did. Feeling her intense glare boring into him, Gray immediately feigns ignorance, asking if she's making a big deal out of nothing. The dojo master slowly shuts her eyes. If he doesn't want to spill, she has zero intention of prying it out of him. Turning back to face him, she confirms what he's really after: a recommendation to an academy. Gray answers directly, asking her to write one for him. She tells him that she could in fact get him into the most prestigious institution in the entire kingdom, the Royal Sword Academy. But she's not going to. Her reasoning is blunt. Gray simply doesn't belong there. The words leave Gray feeling completely gutted, and yet he knows she's right. With his power level as it is, he's just not up to her standards. Right now he's lacking the raw strength, and especially the deep, refined technique of a true master swordsman. But what he wasn't expecting was the sudden shift in her whole demeanor. She tells him not to get it twisted. The place he truly belongs is the World Union Academy. Just hearing the name leaves Gray absolutely floored. This wasn't the top school in some kingdom. It was the #1 academy in the entire world. Countless legends had walked its grounds, and even the legendary sword saints were once students there. Gray, in total disbelief, asked how someone at his current level could ever hope to be accepted. Of course, the dojo master already anticipated this doubt. She lays it on him thick. He's probably realized it by now himself. His body is nowhere near the spec required for a legitimate swordsman. At the Royal Sword Academy, raw skill might let him barely scrape by, but at the World Union Academy, that's not gonna fly. She can't even begin to figure out how Gray pulled off such insane moves. With a body so incredibly frail, Gray lets out a soft, defeated sigh. Everyone at that school is a straight-up monster. With his current physique, he's not even qualified to be in the same league. But the dojo master tells him not to lose hope. There are still 9 months before the exam. The clock is ticking, but it's not a lost cause. Hearing this, Gray's heart begins to pound in his chest. Could she possibly be planning to train him herself? Right on cue, the dojo master warns him to brace for pain, because what's coming next is going to be an absolutely hellish training regimen. Gray has no clue how savage this training is going to be, but it's exactly what he was hoping for. He bows low with respect, pleading for his master to guide him. No matter what happens, he'll pour his soul into learning her blade. From that day forward, Gray stuck to her training plan like glue, grinding through an unforgiving daily routine. On top of the training, he was forced to pack away huge amounts of food with his master, making sure he loaded up on meat. He was even forced to down disgusting medicinal herbs that made his mouth go numb, all designed to forge his body into steel. Still, sword practice was the main event, eating up nearly all of his time. In the blink of an eye, 8 months vanished, and Gray's physical state had leveled up immensely. Even the dojo master admitted that there was almost nothing left for her to teach him. The only thing left was for him to march confidently into the World Union Academy. Even though a month was left before the exam, she felt Gray shouldn't be taking it in some place he didn't know. It was way better to show up early and get the lay of the land. Before he took off, she set him up with a generous amount of cash for his journey. Gray accepted the funds and swore on his life that he wouldn't let her down. And with that, Gray departed to sign up for the World Union Academy. His master offered a faint smile, telling him she would be praying for his victory and that he had to write to her as soon as it was over. After more than 20 days on the move, Gray finally arrived at the World Union Academy. It was the first time he'd ever laid eyes on a place so epic and extravagant. Shortly after, the academy started handing out the passes for the entrance exam. The World Union Academy's testing grounds were absolutely packed with hopefuls, but the rumor was that only about 20 were expected to actually pass. Then again, gossip also said the number of students who got in changed like crazy every year, sometimes 50, sometimes just 1, and some years even hundreds. There was never any fixed number. Before long, a woman with fiery red hair stepped onto a platform facing the crowd. She cut right to the chase, announcing the distribution of the exam passes and telling everyone to grab the papers that were right in front of them. In the next instant, she snapped her fingers. As the sharp sound cut through the air, a shockwave of golden light blasted across everyone there. Immediately, a sheet of paper materialized in each candidate's grasp. Gray looked down at his own candidate number and fencing course. The red-haired woman's voice boomed from the stage, explaining that some of them might be wigging out, seeing nothing on the paper besides their number and their assigned course. She promised them this was just how they did things every single year. The World Union Academy doesn't give a damn about age, gender, nationality, background, or status. In this arena, even names are completely irrelevant. Only those who pass the test matter, and those who prove they're worthy of crossing the bridge will be given one. And for real, successful applicants can even roll with a fake name if that's their vibe. This rule totally blindsides Gray. He never once said he was interested in any sword-related classes, but the academy already locked it in for him. The redhead explains that your major is literally assigned based on your looks. That's it. She dares them, if anyone thinks they were sorted wrong, just raise a hand. She claims she'll literally get on her knees and beg for forgiveness. The whole claim is beyond ridiculous. No one's buying it. Most of the students figure the academy must have done a deep dive investigation on them, long before the exam even started. A few even whisper that she's using some kind of mind-reading spell. Either way, not a single soul believes their entire future was decided by their face. After a tense silence with no hands raised, the red-haired woman declares the exam officially underway. In that same instant, text materializes on Gray's sheet. His fencing practical is set for 8 a.m. on day 1. Gray hisses under his breath. Of all the luck he's up on the very first day, he was banking on having more time to chill and recover, and let his arm heal. The woman coolly adds that this is a one-shot only practical test. Show up late and you're instantly out. No exceptions. Punctuality isn't a suggestion, it's a hard rule. The academy isn't taking any special requests to reschedule. Gray's hand instinctively drifts to his injured arm. Man, if only he had a couple more days to patch himself up. On the journey here, he clashed with an ogre and its monster of a general. In the heat of that desperate moment, he tapped into that mysterious power again. With one clean slice, he annihilated the ogre general. But that power took its toll, forcing him into a long recovery. That's the real reason he barely skated in during the final phase of the academy's entrance exams. His arm got absolutely wrecked in that fight. Looks like he has zero choice but to take this exam busted up. Before he can even process it, a staff member taps him on the shoulder, telling Gray it's his turn to step into the arena. He sucks in a sharp breath, shoving down the images of a total wipeout. His left arm is solid, and his right, well, it can still move a little. This isn't a death sentence. The game plan is simple. Spot the examiner's weak point the second the fight starts, and shut it down fast. Just then, his eyes lock onto the arena where another hopeful is already clashing with the proctor. The examiner drops into a low stance and unleashes a savage swing, launching the beefy challenger clear across the stage in one hit. The defeated kid grabs his sword and makes the walk of shame. A ghost of a smile plays on Gray's lips, but he's not fooling himself. With his arm this messed up, taking that guy down quick is going to be a near impossible task. After effortlessly yeeting the last applicant, the examiner pivots towards Gray and barks at him to get a move on. It's his turn. No time to waste. Gray strides into the arena. His confidence is shot. His right arm is still screaming in pain. The examiner just stands there, hands clasped behind his back, telling Gray to take the first shot, even giving him permission to go all out. Hearing that, Gray's knuckles turn white around his sword hilt. Invitation or not, he was already planning on it. This is his one and only shot. A split second later, Gray explodes forward. In that same instant, his master's words echo in his mind. Swinging a blade isn't just about raw arm power. It's about channeling the force from your entire body and funneling it out through your arm. Time to put that theory to the test. Even if his right arm can barely generate any force, as long as he can pull that power from his core, he can still land a solid hit. In a flash, Gray closes the distance and unleashes his blade. He executes his master's technique perfectly, but it's just not the same. The raw agony from his arm is undeniably nerfing his style. I mean, if fighting without arm strength was actually easy, who would even bother with physical training, right? Just then, the examiner spots a sliver of an opening in Gray's defense and moves to counterattack, but Gray has absolutely no intention of making it that easy for him, and that's when it hits him. Something feels wrong. Why does the examiner's blade feel so slow? There's no way this proctor is weak or he wouldn't have this job, which leaves only one possible explanation. Gray himself has gotten faster. The examiner's blade whistles through the air only for Gray to parry it with zero effort. Gray's mind races comparing this guy to his master. Sure, the examiner has insane brute force, but when it comes to pure speed and skill, he's not even in the same league as her. If Gray just sticks to the sword style his master drilled into him, he might actually be able to compensate for his busted arm. For the next few moments, they trade blows in a dizzying exchange, the sharp ring of steel on steel echoing across the arena. And bit by bit, Gray realizes he's starting to pull ahead, overwhelming the examiner with his speed. A flicker of panic flashes in the examiner's eyes as his face hardens. Seeing that crack in his composure ignites a fire in Gray's chest. This guy isn't the unbeatable monster he thought he was. He actually has a shot. It's just like his master said, she knew he would pass this test. With a deafening clang, their blades crash one last time. But this time, Gray's in control. A lightning-fast flick of his wrist sends the examiner's sword spiraling through the air. His gaze turns to ice. Even with his arm completely messed up, Gray knows without a doubt this victory is his. He is overflowing with confidence now. Even with his right arm being basically useless, he knows he's got this guy beat. Still, the examiner is wickedly fast. He whips his sword back, unleashing a blistering flurry of more than a dozen counterstrikes. But it's all for nothing. Every single move is playing out in slow motion for Gray. Again and again, he effortlessly dances around each blow. The examiner's entire playbook has been downloaded. In the next beat, Gray channels pure force into his left arm, with no flair, no wasted movement. He drives a clean jab straight for the examiner's core. The strike is parried, and that block tells Gray everything he needs to know. The power gap between them is still massive. Taking this guy down with only one good arm is going to be a real problem. Still, he can see the examiner's form getting sloppier. It's a huge gamble, but this could be the opening he's been waiting for. Gray deliberately leaves himself exposed. And just as he predicted, the examiner swallows the bait. Gray's heart hammers in his chest. He has to tank this next hit head on. There's zero room for error. Without a moment's pause, the examiner unleashes a massive swing, convinced this is the blow that will end it all. A faint smirk plays on Gray's lips. Finally, you fell for it. A wide, overcommitted attack like that is the perfect invitation for a counter. His body drops low, coiling every ounce of his power into his legs. With one explosive push, Gray vanishes from sight. An instant later, he reappears directly behind the examiner. There is no better window to end this. It doesn't matter how strong his opponent is. From this position, it is game over. Absolute shock flashes across the examiner's face. He never dreamed Gray could move with such insane speed. But Gray gives him zero time to process it. This exam is finished. Just as Gray's blade is about to make contact, a powerful shout of stop echoes across the entire arena. He freezes on a dime, his sword hovering inches from the examiner's spine. Utterly confused, Gray glances up at the stands. Was this it? Was he the winner? Except, he never actually landed the final blow. A moment later, an official announcement booms from above. The time limit for the exam has expired, and the official outcome of the match is a draw. The word slams into Gray like a physical blow. He was so locked into the fight, so deep in the zone, that he'd totally forgotten the practical exam only lasted 3 minutes. A bitter wave of regret washes over him. It feels like a total failure, like he's let his master down. Frustration boils over as he grips and ungrips the hilt of his sword again and again. Then, without saying a word, Gray just turns and walks away. He gave it everything he had. If his arm hadn't been injured, this whole thing would have been over in a minute. If he couldn't even get past the examiner, the road ahead was going to be an absolute nightmare. Near the exit, Gray stops and slowly looks back. His arm should be healed by next year, which means he's going to have to go through this all over again. Time flies, and an entire week vanishes in a blur. Deep inside the academy, 6 powerful figures are seated around a colossal round table, locked in a heated debate. An elderly man, who's obviously the one in charge, speaks up asking for everyone's final thoughts on the candidates. He wants to know if they're ready to make their final calls. 2 of the instructors immediately start complaining about how wiped out they are, while a third starts arguing that this entire group observation system is inefficient and needs to be scrapped. Right away, someone else fires back, insisting that they can't let a little inconvenience risk them overlooking a true once-in-a-generation genius. The old man just raises a hand, a sharp edge of irritation in his voice. He cuts them off, reminding them he asked for their opinions on the students, not a debate on the exam process. In the very next moment, holographic recordings of every single candidate's exam materialize in the air before them. The judges use these replays to pinpoint exceptional performances, carefully weighing each applicant's raw talent and combat potential before deciding who gets the final stamp of approval. The footage they're watching now is from the fencing course. One instructor notes that aside from the few prodigies who actually managed to defeat the examiner, taking on any more students would just drag the whole class down. He thinks they should just finalize the list now. The room goes quiet. The old man just keeps watching the footage, his face unreadable. After a tense moment, he finally speaks. So, are we all agreed on the qualifiers for the fencing course? Any last thoughts? Just then, a new voice cuts in. Did none of you see that one candidate? The old man pauses, his eyes narrowing. That candidate, was there something special about him? The one who spoke is Professor Ariel. She scans the room, pressing them. Answer me. What did you really think of that student? One by one, the instructors turn their gaze back to the hologram. A tutor scoffs. That kid's power level is average at best. And he's a lefty. I saw the match. Sure, it looked like he was about to snatch the win. But if he has to rely on cheap tricks and elaborate setups just to handle an examiner, his potential is seriously limited. Another instructor adds that while his form was decent, his severe lack of raw power meant he was on the defensive for almost the entire fight. After reviewing the battle from start to finish, they come to a unanimous decision. The boy is simply not World Union Academy material. The footage blinks out of existence, and several instructors shake their heads with disapproval. Ariel looks like she's about to explode. Her mouth opens to argue, but she forces it shut. Inwardly, she's practically laughing at the irony. So many so-called experts in one room, and not a single one of them can truly see. If they're this clueless, this whole group evaluation is a joke. This gem belongs to her, period. The next morning, the Academy's central plaza is packed. Everyone's waiting. Gray's number is called. The rule is simple. If the paper in his hand ignites, he's in. A voice booms across the plaza, announcing the results for the fencing course. Only 6 candidates made the cut. Gray's chest goes tight. This is the moment. Suddenly, one paper erupts in flames, then another and another. 6 students are now officially in the fencing program. But Gray, he's frozen solid. His paper is just a piece of paper. The silence says it all. He failed. The voice overhead doesn't wait. All successful candidates cross the bridge and complete your registration by sundown. The winners are already laughing their cheers, a stark contrast to the dead quiet of Gray's world. His stomach drops. He let his master down. What's he even supposed to do now? Is it back to the Royal Academy as Gray and the other rejects drown in their failure? A new announcement slices through the gloom. Next up, God's Eye special admission. And in that instant, Gray's paper doesn't burn, it erupts in a chilling blue glow. Candidate confirmed. Admitted. The shock hits him like a truck. And he's not the only one. The entire crowd is floored. A God's Eye pick. This year, the words just keep echoing in Gray's head. Wait, did he actually pass? Then he hears a sneer from nearby. Another God's Eye admit. Haven't seen one of those in a hot minute. Gray has literally zero clue what God's Eye even is. First time hearing it. But the glares he's getting are pure poison. Isn't that just the backdoor entry, someone whispers? Guess the World Union Academy has really gone downhill. The words totally blindside Gray. He never dreamed getting picked for something called God's Eye would be seen as cheating. His mind instantly jumps to his master. He doesn't have any connections himself, so if she pulled this off, her influence must be way bigger than he ever imagined. As the two clowns kept trash-talking, an old man shuts them down hard. You two, watch your mouths when you speak of the God's Eye special admission. His eyes turn to ice. God's Eye is a title of honor. It's produced countless heroes over the last 100 years. You kids know nothing. But the two just laugh it off. Of course the old-timers are into God's Eye. That was their generation. One of them shrugs. Oh, we know exactly what God's Eye is. Let's look at the recent ones. Amy White, Bella Albright, Rick Muller, and Jacob Rinfield. He smirks. All God's Eye picks, and every single one of them washed out. Even we newbies know that. God's Eye is a joke now. It's just a label for getting in the easy way. But for Gray, those names are like a gut punch. Because he knows the truth. Amy White, she reached the level of sword god. In his past life, Bella Albright was the absolute pinnacle of magic. And Rick Muller and Jacob Rinfield, they were the main event in the war against the cleansers. Gray swallows hard. He realizes what this means. His name is now on a list with those legends. The announcer cuts in again. The entrance ceremony begins in 30 minutes. All students change into your uniforms and gather at the plaza in front of the main building. A bit later, Gray is suited up like everyone else. They're all waiting, but for a minute, nobody shows. Everyone's like, are we in the right spot? Then some professor sprints over, apologizing like crazy. Sorry, technical difficulties, he pants. Big setup issue. Can everyone please back up so I can cast the spell right here? The crowd shuffles back 10 meters. On the ground, intricate gold patterns begin to glow into existence. Everyone's looking around, totally confused. The professor plants his hand on the ground. Instantly, a tidal wave of golden mana explodes outward. It's massive. A colossal golden magic circle ignites, covering the entire plaza. From its center, a glowing golden staircase materializes, stretching right up into the building. You can hear gasps from all around. That level of dense, controlled magic. This is the power of a World Union Academy instructor. Before they can even process it, a second golden staircase appears next to the building, and the new students are absolutely losing their minds. The instructor just chuckles. Go on, find a seat anywhere you like. The crowd is still buzzing, completely stunned. They can't stop talking about that insane teleportation array. Gray doesn't waste time looking around. He just grabs the first open seat. Looks like the Academy wanted the ceremony to have a panoramic view of the campus. But using high-level teleportation magic just for a good view, that's flexing on a whole new level. Still, you gotta admit, Gray was officially a student at the World Union Academy. Remembering the instructors he'd seen over the past 2 days, he couldn't help but be low-key impressed by how stacked this place was. Then someone up front starts muttering, aren't there way too many seats here? They only accepted like 30 people. This is overkill. Someone else just laughed. Bro, you seriously have no clue. The student getting grilled didn't even flinch. He just scratched his head. If it wasn't about sword training, it basically went in one ear and out the other. A girl snapped her fingers. All right, let me break it down for you. The World Union Academy isn't just a name, she explained casually. The top prospects from every corner of the globe are getting sized up. It's not just our squad. She pointed at the sky. Look up. They're already rolling in. The sword-obsessed student's eyes went wide. Slicing through the clouds were multiple airships flanked by massive flying beasts. He shot to his feet. Yo, that's insane. Gray's gaze drifted upward too, but it locked onto a smaller craft suspended beneath one of the behemoth airships. His whole demeanor hardened. The Strato airship. He recognized it instantly. He'd been on that ship before back during his stint with a cleansing suppression unit, one of the largest airships on the planet, and they were flexing it for a simple entrance ceremony. Then again, that kind of ridiculous overkill was totally on brand for the World Union Academy. As the fleet touched down, a flood of students from all over the world began pouring into the venue. At that exact moment, a large weathered hand slammed down on the podium. It appears everyone has arrived, a deep voice declared. Then let the World Union Academy's entrance ceremony and begin. What came next was a speech that droned on for a full 30 minutes. Gray nearly dozed off, figuring out that even in a place like this, an orientation was still an orientation, utterly boring. Just then, a student near Gray stood and announced, "Next, we will have addresses from the top students of each department. First up, the #1 student of the Swordsmanship Division, Leonhard Appius." As a figure strode onto the stage, a wave of whispers swept through the crowd. Is that really him? The guy who supposedly one-shot an examiner during the entrance exam? The rumors even whispered that his sword skills could rival a full-fledged professor's. Leonhard Appius, a name that was basically a synonym for god-tier talent. Gray watched him with a flicker of interest. The guy's aura was intense, no doubt. But the strange thing was, Gray couldn't remember Leonhard ever accomplishing anything truly decisive. Not in his previous life anyway. Leonhard first gave a polite nod to the faculty, before asking in a calm voice, "May I speak freely?" After the instructors exchanged a quick look, they nodded. With permission granted, Leonhard began his speech. His very first sentence dropped like a bomb, silencing the entire arena. "I have a formal complaint to raise with the Academy." Then, completely shifting his tone, he added, "But before that, I want to welcome all the students who were admitted through the standard process. It is an honor to be accepted alongside you. Let us all strive together, so that upon graduation, we can become people who genuinely contribute to the world." The applause was weak. The speech was painfully generic. Nobody cared. That complaint, though, now that had everyone's attention. Leonhard didn't seem to notice. "I look forward to the day we stand tall, advancing together as students of the World Union Academy." His gaze sharpened, locking onto a spot deep in the back of the hall. "But unfortunately, among our ranks there is someone who simply doesn't belong here." "Isn't that right?" he asked, his voice laced with ice. "Professor Ariel, the person in charge of the God's Eye missions." Ariel was clearly not expecting to be put on the spot. Internally, she scoffed. What an arrogant little brat. Outwardly, she maintained a gentle smile. "Every student present has passed this academy's grueling evaluations. They may not possess your level of strength, but to exclude them would be a foolish mistake." Her eyes narrowed ever so slightly. "So do tell me, are you suggesting that the God's Eye selection process is unfair?" And that was the exact question Leonhard had been waiting to hear. "I'm not talking about the students who passed the regular exams. What Leon was targeting was the one student Professor Ariel had personally ushered in through a side entrance, the God's Eye special admission." Hearing Leon's accusation, Professor Ariel didn't get angry. Instead, she laughed. This kid really had no fear, and it was impossible to tell if it was just arrogance or true confidence. Leon waved his hand dismissively and shouted, "That's special. Admit, get up here now, return your uniform and leave this academy, because you don't have the right to stand here with us." But nobody moved. Aside from the 30 students in their little circle, the other several hundred had never laid eyes on Gray, and they were all dying to see what this special admit Leon was so fired up about actually looked like. Gray, of course, had zero intention of standing up, not in front of this entire crowd. Seriously, where was all this hostility coming from? Luckily for him, Leon had no idea what he looked like. That was a close one. Maybe, just maybe, if he stayed put, he could avoid getting dragged into this drama. Ariel let out a chuckle. "It seems this year's freshmen are quite spirited." Leon's patience was wearing thin. "Professor, I'm being completely serious. Stop admitting students through the back door." In the very next instant, Ariel vanished and reappeared directly behind Leon. She spoke lightly, but her words hit like a truck. "Do you truly believe you're stronger than the child I personally chose?" The entire crowd was absolutely stunned. Leon was the undisputed ace of the sword division, and Professor Ariel was flat out saying he might be weaker than this mystery admit. Even Leon looked completely shocked. "Professor, that joke is going way too far. How could I possibly be weaker than some backdoor reject?" Leon's pride was on fire. He felt completely disrespected. He locked eyes with Ariel, his gaze intense. "Like hell, he's stronger than me." "Oh, you think I'm wrong?" Ariel didn't even flinch. A sly smile crept across her face. She was digging this vibe. "All right then, how about a little wager?" Leon looked thrown. "A wager? What's there to bet on? Just drag him up here and let's duel." The moment he said that, the playful look on Ariel's face vanished. "The stakes, my career, and that kid's spot at this academy." The words hung in the air, and just like that, both Gray and Leon were frozen solid. Total shock. All Gray could think was, "Yo, this Professor Ariel is absolutely wild." But this wasn't just wild. Gray realized it was completely reckless. With his arm messed up like this, there was absolutely no shot he could take down a monster like Leon. Ariel picked up on Leon's hesitation. "You're not seriously planning on making me fight that special? Admit one-on-one, are you?" Leon asked. Ariel just shook her head. "Please. I'd never do something that barbaric. If you actually went all out, he'd be dead. And as an educator, I can't exactly put a student's life on the line." A vein pulsed at the corner of Leon's mouth. Oh, she definitely hit a nerve. Professor, he snarled, are you trying to provoke me? Because if you are, I'll take that challenge even if it puts me in a coffin. But Ariel, she was completely unbothered. Which is why we're not betting on a duel. We're using monsters, she explained. It's a much cleaner way to do this. Plus, she knew this was Leon's turf. The guy was a beast when it came to monster hunting. Leon's expression hardened. You've done your homework. His voice was low. So what's the actual bet? Ariel's proposal was deceptively simple. All you have to do is take down a monster of my choosing. We'll split the match into a few rounds. Each round I'll summon a tougher beast. The first person who can't eliminate their target loses. Simple as that. If your side loses, Ariel declared, I will resign my post, and every single special admission student gets kicked out of the academy. Gray just let out a long sigh. Man, this is so extra. All he wanted to do was grind and get stronger in peace. Ariel laid out the terms, then stepped right up to Leon, a challenging smirk on her face. So, you in, or are you scared? Leon had no doubt he could win, but he was no fool. He needed to know exactly what kind of monster he was being pitted against. This was one of Leon's biggest strengths. He never just ran on pure ego, not even when he was 99% sure he could body any opponent. He flat out refused to walk into some unknown setup. Hearing this, Ariel simply nodded, tapping her chin like she was giving it some serious thought. All right then, let's kick things off with an ogre general, she added. If that's too easy for you, I can always dial up the difficulty. The entire hall absolutely erupted. An ogre general, that was a disaster-class monster, something way beyond what any student should be fighting. Meanwhile, a cold feeling of dread started creeping over Gray. Why an ogre general specifically? Was Leon right? Was this whole thing some kind of setup? Bam! Leon's fist slammed down on the table. Professor Ariel, with all due respect, you have to be joking. He growled, his voice low and dangerous. An ogre general isn't something one person can just kill. That's when Ariel clarified. Of course I'm not sending him to fight one tomorrow. I'm giving him a full year. That's a reasonable time frame, don't you think? But Leon wasn't buying it. If someone could get strong enough to solo a disaster-level monster in 1 year, our world wouldn't be in this mess. Pick something realistic. That's literally impossible for anyone. Hearing Leon's words, Gray's jaw went slack for a second. And then a slow, knowing smile started to spread across his face. It finally clicked. Gray understood Ariel's entire game. Meanwhile, Leon, completely oblivious that he'd just walked straight into a trap, kept arguing his point. You picked an impossible target on purpose, he accused. You're trying to force a draw so nobody wins. I'm not agreeing to that. Ariel took a few slow, deliberate steps toward him. Fine. Let's add one more rule. She paused. If it's a draw, you win. Leon froze. The implication hit him like a truck. If the special admit couldn't kill the ogre general, Ariel would be fired on the spot. Not only that, every special admission student would be expelled. Ariel's eyes gleamed with amusement. Now, how does that sound? In Leon's mind, Ariel had to be completely insane. As far as he was concerned, this bet was already over. Hearing his silence, Ariel just laughed and turned her back. I'll take your silence as a yes, she said over her shoulder. It's settled then. But Leon still had one more thing. Just so we're clear, he pressed, we're talking about a full-power ogre general, right? Not some weakened one. Of course, Ariel replied without missing a beat. With an elegant flick of her fingers, violet mana began to swirl around the ring on her hand, coalescing into a magical contract. A glowing quill materialized, scripting the conditions of the bet in shimmering letters. In moments, the finished document floated down in front of Leon. Every single detail was spelled out in the magical pact. If he saw no loopholes, all he had to do was sign. Leon scanned every line, making sure there were no tricks. He found nothing. Satisfied, he grabbed the quill and scribbled his name, sealing the deal. Even though he was sure of his victory, he had to ask, do you honestly believe that kid has a chance? Ariel simply shrugged. I have no idea. It all comes down to how hard he's willing to work for it. With the deal sealed, Ariel calmly returned to her seat. Around the room, the other professors were whispering. They all thought she had completely lost it. Sitting in the back, Gray let out a massive sigh. Honestly, this whole debate was a total snooze fest. But then when Ariel mentioned the 1-year time limit, something clicked. Wait a minute, he thought. Could she be counting the one I already took down before I even got here? The moment their eyes locked, Gray's heart hammered in his chest. That one look confirmed everything. His wild guess, it was dead on. Next thing he knew, Gray was sitting through his first ever magic lecture. Moments later, Gray found himself stepping into a lecture hall for the very first time, ready to unravel the mysteries of magic. The magic instructor stood at the podium, his voice echoing calmly through the hall. I'm sure some of you are shocked. We're diving straight into lessons on day 1. But let me be clear. As students of this academy, you don't have a single day to waste. He launched right into the fundamentals of magic, how to actually wield it. Inside every one of you, he explained, flows an invisible energy source we call ether. By mastering the magic circuits woven within your own bodies, you can manifest that energy into spells. Tucked away in the last row, Gray wasn't sweating it. He'd been worried about being out of his depth, but so far this was all review. He'd heard this exact same speech almost word for word back at the training camp. Gray's eyes drifted downward. Besides, he had a bigger problem. Of all the people he got stuck in the same class as that insufferably arrogant dude. A bitter smile touched his lips. I really don't have time for this drama, he thought. Just please nobody figure out I'm the special admit from Godsai. Bad move. The professor's sharp eyes landed right on him. You in the back. Far right. You seem exceptionally bored. Turns out the instructor had been zeroed in on Gray from the start. We're not even 5 minutes into the first class. And you're already spacing out. You've got some serious nerve. Gray was floored. He never thought he'd get called out so fast. Especially not from the cheap seats. He stammered an apology, but it was too late. The instructor snapped his book shut with a loud crack. If you're so confident, why don't you give us a little demonstration for the class? He was probably expecting a simple textbook spell. But before the professor could finish, Gray jumped in. With all due respect, sir, isn't this the swordsmanship track? I figured not being able to use magic wouldn't be a big deal. A cold, humorless laugh escaped the instructor. Even if you're just a sword swinger, you need to grasp fundamental magic to coordinate with actual mages on the battlefield. At the bare minimum, you will learn the basics and get a feel for wielding them. A jolt went through Gray. Déjà vu. This entire lecture was a carbon copy of the one from training camp. And if the lecture was the same, would the spell be too Gray? Cut the instructor off again. Are we learning? Ether bullet. For a fraction of a second, the instructor went completely still. You know of that spell. Can you cast it? A wave of relief washed over Gray. Okay, so that hellish training camp wasn't a total waste after all. Sensing an opportunity for some drama, the instructor pounced. Leon, you can cast Ether Bullet as well, can't you? Leon rose slowly to his feet, a predator uncoiling. Yes, Professor. I'm familiar with the spell, he added with a smug look. That being said, my training goes far beyond simple swordplay. I've been honing my magic since long before I came here. Pitting him against me in a live fire exercise might be a bit much for him. The professor just waved a dismissive hand. Don't worry about the power gap. You'll both be using the same spell. He won't die. And I'm not going to tell you to hold back. After all, he announced to the room that gray-haired kid is this year's Godsai. Now student, attack. At that single word, every head in the room whipped around, eyes wide with a burning curiosity for the legendary Godsai. An icy dread washed over Gray. Just like that, he'd been thrown to the wolves. Dozens of eyes pinned him in place. The old man had just blown his cover completely. A cunning smile twisted the instructor's lips. The look said it all. Let's see what you've really got, trying to slack off in my class. Leon was on his feet again. In that case, I'll be happy to teach him about the rules around here. His eyes blazed with fury. I'll show him exactly what this academy is all about. Gray was completely lost. What was this guy's beef with him? You're the genius, I'm the special admit. Can't we just stay in our own lanes? An uneasy look settled on Gray's face. He had no clue how long this dude planned on making his life a living hell. A few moments later, Gray and Leon stood facing each other on the dueling platform. The rules were simple, the instructor explained. On his signal, they would unleash their ether bullets. Gray's stomach churned. He'd only had a few days of magic training, and even though the professor said no one would die, walking away from this, unscathed, felt like a long shot. The signal was given. In an instant, Leon condensed an ether bullet in his palm, a nasty sneer on his face. Let me show you the real difference between us. Gray was out of options. He opened his own palm and unleashed the spell he'd been forced to learn. Leon's projectile zipped forward first, but it was pathetically small. Then came Gray's. It wasn't a bullet. It was a meteor. A cannon blast. The power difference was easily 300 to 1. For one heart-stopping second, both boys were frozen in pure shock. Leon's mind couldn't process why Gray's spell was a monster compared to his, while Gray was just as baffled by how weak and unfamiliar Leon's version looked. But it was too late. The moment that colossal sphere of energy left Gray's hand, there was no calling it back. All the color drained from Leon's face. A direct hit with that kind of power, he wouldn't just die, he'd be instantly erased from existence. The magic instructor's arm snapped up golden energy, flaring into a defensive spell. A shimmering barrier materialized, intercepting the ether bullet and barely saving Leon's skin. But the instructor was completely rattled. That was way too close. He couldn't even begin to process how Gray had just unleashed a blast of that magnitude before. Spiderweb cracks raced across the shield's surface. A moment later, the entire barrier exploded, unleashing a savage shockwave that sent both of them hurtling through the air. The raw force of the blast ripped through the room, making everyone flinch and shut their eyes tight. Leon's body was ragdolled backward, absolutely battered by the insane impact. The instructor scrambled to his side. Are you okay? When he got to Leon, the kid was trembling uncontrollably. Leon struggled to his feet, insisting he was fine, for the most part. But they both knew without that shield, he would have been toast. After making sure Leon wasn't critically injured, the instructor locked his eyes on Gray. If that barrier hadn't absorbed most of the blow, Leon would be dead right now. Just who in the world was this kid? The instructor knew he needed answers, and he needed them now. There were too many questions. Hell, none of the professors at the academy could conjure an ether bullet that massive. It felt like he'd just witnessed a whole new level of magic. At the same time, Gray was just staring down at his own hand in total confusion. Why was Leon's ether bullet so weak compared to his? It was pathetic. That was definitely not the version of the spell Gray knew. Could the ether bullet he learned in the suppression unit be that different from what the academy was teaching? I mean, his training was based on magic theory from 10 years in the future. Still, Gray played dumb, asking, "Did I mess up the spell?" The instructor heaved a sigh. "What you used was an ether bullet, all right. There's no doubt about that," the professor said, his voice deadly serious. "But the one you fired was built on a fundamentally different principle. What you just cast was not a standard issue ether bullet. Based on what I saw, that was a super compressed ether bullet." The entire class went dead silent. Not a single one of them had ever even heard of compression magic that advanced. The professor cast his own ether bullet to demonstrate, but it was just a tiny spark compared to the sun Gray had unleashed. This is a power even we struggle to tame. And yet you didn't just fire it. You stabilized it and perfectly molded it into a complete spell. There isn't another soul in this entire academy who could replicate what you just did. Whispers immediately erupted across the hall. "That's the most OP ether bullet I've ever seen. Is this why he got that special admission through the God's Eye? If he's this cracked, then shouldn't he have been put straight into the magic program, instead of some weird special track?" Listening to all the chatter, Gray was trying to figure it out too. Every single spell they had drilled into them at the suppression unit's training camp was cast this way. And to be real, even among his squad mates, Gray never thought he was anything special when it came to magic. That's why he just couldn't accept the professor's praise. "Professor, are you serious? With the right training, shouldn't pretty much anyone be able to do this?" The professor just burst out laughing. That laugh just left Gray even more confused. "Wait, was I actually wrong?" Laughing even harder, the professor boomed. "You're a true prodigy. Making you waste your time on swordsmanship is a criminal waste of talent." Hearing those words, Gray felt a weird pang of regret. Isn't that laying it on a bit thick? In a single stride, the professor was right in front of him, his eyes blazing with earnestness. "You need to transfer to the magic department and become my direct apprentice. I will personally guarantee your spot, and I will oversee all of your training. Your innate talent for magic completely eclipses your skill with a sword." Gray rejected him flat out. "I'll pass, Professor. I've always been told I'm trash at magic." The professor just waved it off. "Those people were blind. They had zero vision. You've already mastered ether compression, and at your age, you casually fired off a super compressed ether bullet. By this academy's standards, you're a once-in-a-generation genius. I will stake my reputation on it. I don't know what fool told you you had no magic talent, but they clearly have no idea what they're talking about. Gray, will you seriously not reconsider?" Switching to the magic curriculum, the entire crowd was shook hearing this kind of praise from a professor who was famous for almost never complimenting anyone. This was next level. The professor raised a single finger and declared, "For you to refuse to study magic would be the greatest loss this world has ever known. It would be a crime against magic itself." Gray just laughed. "Professor, you're being so extra." But right then, something clicked in his head. The ether compression the professor kept talking about. Gray had heard that term before. His mind flashed back to an old lesson. A voice from his past echoed in his memory. "You don't have a real grasp on what life force truly is." And that's the kicker with casting proper magic. It's insanely difficult. You have to constantly compress the ether coursing through your veins. Then you have to cherry-pick the exact portions that have mingled with your odd. At least that's the textbook explanation the instructor used to give. But looking back on it now, that lecture hits different. Gray cuts to the chase and asks the professor if he's ever even heard of odd. The professor just gives him a completely blank stare. What in the world is that? From that one reaction, Gray confirms his suspicion. The very concept of OD was completely unknown in this era. If that's the case, then every single thing he mastered in the suppression unit was knowledge from a distant future concepts this world hadn't even dreamed of yet. Gray knew he'd have to lock that information down tight. One wrong word to the wrong person could throw the entire world into chaos. The professor, practically buzzing with excitement, asks again, "Are you absolutely certain you don't want to switch to the magic curriculum?" Gray's reply was calm and steady. "I'm sorry, but I'm a swordsman at heart. I seriously appreciate the offer, but I'm going to have to pass." The professor lets out a defeated sigh. "Well, if your mind's made up, I can't exactly force you. Still, don't think I'm giving up that easily. If you ever have a change of heart, my door is always open." Gray just scratches his head, feeling a little awkward. "Thank you, sir, I appreciate it." The professor then tells Gray to head back to his seat, giving him a full-on hall pass. He wouldn't get chewed out, even if his mind wandered during the lecture. In fact, if the lesson got boring, he was free to just dip. In the professor's view, this 101-level class was a complete waste of time for a prodigy like Gray. The classroom immediately erupts in whispers. That dude is on another level. I can't believe Professor Carlos is rating him that highly. Seeing this went down today was totally worth it. As Gray turns to leave, Leon unconsciously lurches forward. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a war drum. In that single moment, something shifted inside him. The once proud and arrogant Leon was already starting to look up to Gray with total admiration. A sudden chill shot down Gray's spine. Please don't tell me I'm about to get dragged into some main character drama again. Later, a note from Professor Ariel finds its way to him. See me in my office after school. The summons caught him completely off guard. He never expected to be called in so suddenly. Gray couldn't help but wonder if Professor Carlos was the one pulling the strings, trying to get Ariel to poach him for the magic department. A short while later, he's standing outside Ariel's office hoping his gut feeling was dead wrong. He gives the door a light knock, only to find it's already unlocked. After a moment of silence, Gray decides to just let himself in. Sorry to intrude, he says. The next instant, a sword comes slicing through the air straight at his head. It was almost pure reflex. Gray whips out his own blade. With one clean, effortless motion, he parries the strike and sends his attacker's weapon flying. The counter was so smooth, so decisive. The girl freezes, totally shocked, clearly not expecting him to move that fast. What she couldn't possibly know was that it wasn't a conscious move at all. Gray's body had simply reacted on its own. Still, one question burned in his mind. Why the hell was I just jumped the second I walked in? Then, Gray's eyes widened in recognition. The girl standing before him looked eerily familiar. As she slowly turned, he saw it, the blue hair, the golden eyes, and the dangerously sharp, beautiful face. Over by the desk, Professor Ariel just laughs. Impressive reflexes. Looks like my judgment was on the money. Bringing you into this academy was the right move after all. Two other instructors stood nearby, looking far less convinced. One of them mutters, Bella, were you sandbagging just now? Did your mentor tell you to go easy? Your form was textbook perfect? But your sword got knocked aside way too easily. Something isn't adding up. Hearing the name Bella, Gray's heart lurches, so it really was her. Bella, or as he knew her in his past life, Black. The woman who would become a legendary witch, and the very mage who once taught him magic. Ariel had zero time for their skepticism. She snaps, are you two for real right now, saying something that clueless? If you can't even tell he was the one holding back, maybe you two should think about resigning. The man just bursts out laughing. Easy there, Ariel. It was just a joke. As he speaks, he casually hands over a stack of coins. They were openly gambling on him right in front of his face. Gray calmly sheathes his sword, a flicker of pure annoyance in his eyes. This is getting ridiculous, he asks bluntly. You weren't seriously using me as the centerpiece for a bet, were you, Ariel? Doesn't deny it. We were. We bet on whether you could handle Bella's little ambush, and thanks to you, I cleaned up. With a flick of her thumb, she tosses a heavy coin his way. That's your cut. The second the coin lands in his palm, every trace of Gray's annoyance completely vanishes. This single coin was more than enough to cover his living expenses for an entire year. One of the instructors squints at Gray's arm and speaks up. Just like Ariel said, from that split-second exchange, it looked like he deliberately avoided using his dominant arm. It was almost like he was instinctively shielding an arm that he couldn't even use properly. Another instructor nodded in agreement. His right arm is definitely wrecked, and it's bad. That doesn't look like a simple muscle tear. This feels way deeper. Nah, a simple scratch wouldn't do that. Something massive either slammed into it or an outside force totally wrecked it. And if he doesn't get that fixed, it's going to be a chronic problem for life. Gray was just floored by their breakdown. So, this is what the World Union Academy is all about. These guys figured all that out with a single look. The two of them just smirked. If we couldn't spot something that obvious, we'd have no business teaching here. But it looks like Ariel was already onto it back during the entrance exams. Ariel had finally had enough. All right, you've made your point. Now get out. He's my student, and I'm not giving up on him. So don't you dare act like you know better than me. But before they dipped, the instructors dropped one last parting shot. We'll give you this. The kid's got potential. For now. Just make sure you guide him right. But there's one thing you gotta remember. If he can't fix that injury, then he hasn't truly met the standards to be here. And if that's the case, his road ahead is gonna be brutal. That warning shot a wave of ice through Gray's chest. Looks like I seriously need to find a way to fix my arm. The door clicked shut, leaving just the three of them in the room. Ariel broke the silence. Finally, those pests are gone. Now, Finn, let's talk about your magic, and about the girl standing right next to you. So I heard some pretty interesting tea today. Word is you pulled off some super compressed ether in Professor Carlos's class. Carlos spilled everything to me personally. He actually stormed into my office demanding I transfer you to the magic division, but I shot him down. She finished her sentence and slowly, deliberately placed her coffee cup down. Pinned by her stare, Gray felt like an open book. She could see it clear as day he was born to wield a sword, not sling spells. Their eyes locked and Gray felt a jolt. Her pupils, they just transformed. Ariel stated, her voice dead calm, that he didn't seem skilled at ether compression. He didn't even look like someone who'd ever seriously practiced it. Gray nervously took a sip of his tea. Damn, she saw right through him. I should have known I couldn't lie to her, so he just came clean. He had never actually been trained in compression magic. This was exactly what Ariel expected to hear. After all, nobody could lie to her face. Still, she needed to know what kind of trick he'd pulled. She promised to keep it a secret, even throwing in a reward. The real reason she was pushing so hard, it was all for the girl standing right next to him. I need you to teach her, because this compression magic is the key to her entire future. Hearing that, it all clicked for Gray. He was called here specifically for Bella. Ariel confirmed it. Although she's a genius when it comes to theory, her practical skills are nowhere near the top tier. No matter how hard she tries, she just can't get ether compression down. And that's the one thing holding her back from creating super compressed ether. In his past life, Gray remembered hearing that Bella Albright was a resident, and now it all made perfect sense. According to what Professor Ariel heard from Professor Carlos, when you used super compressed ether, it didn't even look like you were compressing anything. If there's a loophole, a way to use that power without the actual compression, then she won't have to be sent to Professor Bradley. Gray slowly lowered his cup, quietly repeating that name, Professor Bradley, and then he froze. You don't mean? Varian Bradley. Ariel just nodded. I figured you'd know the name. Oh, Gray knew him all right. Varian Bradley was infamous. The guy was a monster who ran countless human experiments, leaving a trail of bodies in his wake. Even worse, he triggered catastrophic magical disasters that wiped out tens of thousands of people. He was one of the most twisted magical criminals in history, and in this era, he was still out there. If Bella can't master super compressed ether by the end of the year, Ariel said, her voice chillingly calm, she'll be sent to him for what they call surgery. Gray's stomach dropped. Sending Bella to that place was basically a death sentence. On paper, the procedure is supposed to enhance magical aptitude, but in reality, it was just a one-way ticket to being a lab rat, which is why Ariel said quietly, Bella's life is in your hands now. Gray didn't answer. His mind was racing. He held the keys to magical knowledge, from an era that hadn't even happened yet. Spilling that kind of secret could completely shatter the timeline. Beside him, Bella's hands started to shake. You could see the desperation in her eyes, but she wasn't about to pressure him into a decision. Gray saw everything. He knew Bella was destined to be a core fighter in the future war. She couldn't afford to fail, because their enemy, the Arbiter, was just on another level. Having one more powerhouse ally like her on their side would be a total game changer. Gray had tasted that despair once before, and there was no way in hell he was going through that again. If he could rewrite the future with what he knows, the world's forces would be infinitely stronger. They wouldn't get wiped out in a single devastating blow. Lost in that thought, a small dark chuckle escaped Gray's lips. In that case, why the hell not? Even if all he could do was change Bella's fate and derail that future hell she was headed for, changing it had to be for the better. The next moment his decision made, Gray placed his coffee cup down on the table with a firm final click. He shot Bella a reassuring smile. Don't even sweat it. I'm about to give you the full rundown on super compressed ether. Someone with your raw talent, you're gonna master this easy. 3 hours later, the scene shifts to the arena. Gray wheels out a chalkboard and starts unpacking the very foundations of magic itself. At the heart of his entire lecture was one thing: super compressed ether. This was the sum total of every magical secret he knew. But per their agreement, his name could never be attached to any of this. Seeing his concern, both Bella and Professor Ariel were quick to put his mind at ease. We're bound by a magic contract. The moment it's broken, the one who broke it dies. There's no getting out of it, no second chances. With a casual wave, Gray fixed his gaze on Bella. Okay, I just threw a lot at you. Any initial thoughts? Whatever's on your mind, just spit it out. Meanwhile, Professor Ariel felt a migraine brewing. She was no stranger to magic, but this was on another level. After all, her real mastery was with a blade. Heck, just processing the idea of odd from Gray's lecture had been enough to completely floor her. And everything he explained after that just blew past all her known limits, leaving her mind completely fried and struggling to compute. That's when Bella slowly moved forward. This magic you've laid out, it's ridiculously complex, yet its fundamental design is perfectly logical. Honestly, if I had to find an analogy, it's like listening to someone teach magic from 100 years in the future. With this look of adorable intensity, she praised him. Just hearing you explain it would be enough to literally launch the history of magic a century into the future. You're a true magical genius. Gray felt a little flustered by the compliment. That's because this is actual knowledge from the future, he thought. 10 years into the future to be exact, and she's the one who originally taught it to me. Magic had evolved at a mind-blowing rate during that decade, a leap so massive it felt like they'd skipped 100 years of progress. Professor Ariel, completely out of her depth with Gray's theory, turned to Bella for a reality check. A lot of this is beyond my ability to judge. Tell me, is what he's saying even remotely possible? Bella gave a solemn nod. This theory is almost certainly correct. It doesn't contradict any of our current magical principles. Besides, she was thinking, the fastest way to prove it was to just do it. That's why we came here today, after all. Bella drew a steadying breath, her voice low but firm. If everything Professor Gray has laid out is true, then the spell I'm holding should actually work. If Bella's incantation truly channeled the theory Gray had explained, the scene that was about to unfold would be absolutely insane. In the next instant, Bella began to weave her magic. This was the first time she had ever truly unleashed her power without holding anything back. Gray was completely floored. This is her full power, if his memory was right. The future version of Bella could annihilate an entire city with a single full power attack. He couldn't help but wonder just how much raw magic she was packing 10 years early. A colossal magic circle exploded into view before them. You could see it though. At her current level, Bella was clearly straining to wrangle this overwhelming surge of power. Gray sensed something was off immediately, but Bella didn't hesitate for a second. All she cared about was putting this new magic to the test. Her lips were a blur as she recited the incantation, her focus absolute. A heartbeat, later a brilliant, golden light completely consumed Gray's body. Then that golden radiance erupted skyward as if trying to punch a hole through the heavens. Gray was left totally speechless. So this is what Bella was capable of 10 years ago. No wonder. She was destined to become a core pillar of the future expeditionary force. That overwhelming power was enough to strike fear into anyone. If Bella hadn't wrestled it under control at the very last second, Gray would have been instantly vaporized. Just moments before, a blazing inferno had been hurtling straight for his face, but right before impact, the entire spell violently changed direction. It was all Bella. Pure control. A wave of exhilaration flooded her. She'd actually succeeded on her very first try, and even managed to tame it. Under her command, the raging flames slowly coalesced, transforming into a soaring dragon made of fire. Gray couldn't help but be impressed. She really is a prodigy. A spell this insanely complex, and she hadn't just understood it instantly. She had manifested it. Gray was sure of it now. If Bella was by his side, he could, one day, raise an entire generation of magical powerhouses to fight the purifiers. The fire spell detonated with terrifying force, and then winked out of existence. In a flash, Bella's ether reserves were completely drained. Utterly exhausted, she crumpled to the ground, a classic sign of magical burnout. Gray rushed to her side, his heart pounding. Bella was a cornerstone of the future. He couldn't let anything happen to her. Ariel's voice came from behind him, calm and collected. She's just asleep. What are you so worked up about? Bella is still an innocent kid at this age. Don't go getting any weird ideas. Gray let out an exasperated laugh but didn't bother to reply. As long as Bella was okay, nothing else mattered. Even in her semi-conscious state, Bella glanced up at the embers, still hanging in the air, a look of pure disbelief on her face. She had actually constructed magic on that insane scale in such a short amount of time. Just before she completely passed out, she murmured softly, "The amazing part isn't me. It's the theory. Being able to wield ultra-compressed ether so easily. That's all thanks to Lord Gray's knowledge." What she couldn't possibly know was that the theory itself was originally her own masterpiece, just brought back in time by Gray. Professor Ariel let out a soft chuckle. Well, since she can already create super-compressed forms, there's no need for the surgery anymore. I'll personally inform Brad that the whole thing is cancelled. He felt a wave of relief wash over him. They had just dodged a bullet, a procedure with an extremely high risk of catastrophic failure. What was even more reassuring was that Bella had never lost control of her magic. That alone was stone-cold proof of her terrifying potential. He turned his head, asking with a hint of curiosity, "When you say it, are you referring to her control over her magic?" "Exactly. Control." Ariel confirmed Bradley's procedure can definitely jack up your raw magical power, but the cost is a total loss of fine control. The exact mechanism is top secret, but from what I gather, it involves forcibly shattering the body's internal limiters. Hearing this, he rubbed his chin as it all clicked. So that's what it was. He remembered her from the previous timeline, the witch who wielded overwhelming power she could never hope to control. He'd been put through this exact procedure. There was zero doubt. A laugh escaped Ariel's lips. "But because of you, Bella can now generate hyper-compressed forms. That means our little contract, it's officially fulfilled." With a flick of her hand, she went on, "Now it's my turn to uphold my end of the deal. First things first, your arm." Ariel's mind was already made up. She was about to unleash a spell called Heal, to mend his shattered arm. In the blink of an eye, a brilliant blue magic erupted from her palm, making him gawk in utter disbelief. She pressed the pulsing energy against the back of his hand, and began mending his mangled right arm. A potent healing force engulfed his entire limb, bringing a cool, soothing wave with it. The magic worked fast. Ariel asked how it felt. He gave his wrist a quick rotation, and instantly felt the change. What absolutely floored him was that his wrist now moved with the same freedom it had before the injury. A massive wave of excitement crashed over Gray. Thank you so much, Professor. Does this mean I get to enroll in the academy? Still, one question kept nagging him. Even powerful healing potions were useless, so how did Ariel fix it so damn easily? Professor Ariel just chuckled. Don't you dare lump my nerve restoration magic in with some common healing potion. After that, she paused for a beat, a flicker of concern on her face. You're sure it feels exactly the same as before, right? Why not give your sword a swing and really test it? Gray stepped back, slowly drawing his weapon. All right then, let's see how this arm holds up. He swung once lightly. The feeling was off. His brow furrowed in concentration. He shot a look at his wrist, then decided to go again. Whoosh, whoosh. He unleashed a flurry of dozens of lightning-fast slashes, every single one matching his old combat speed. Unfortunately, the outcome was nowhere near perfect. A bead of sweat trickled down his temple. Gray stopped cold and turned to Ariel. My arm, it's not as fluid as it used to be, Professor. Ariel pinched the bridge of her nose and let out a sigh. Just as I feared. I repaired your nerves, but my magic is powerless against damage to the soul. Gray looked totally lost. Are you saying the soul is actually a real thing? Ariel nodded. You heard me. The soul is real. Even if modern magical theory hasn't proven it, I know for a fact that it exists. The reason she could declare that with such insane confidence was simple. Ariel wielded a power so terrifying, it was practically unnatural. Her eyes could perceive souls. This was a secret she had never told another living person. Through her vision, she could see Gray's soul slowly piecing itself back together. As long as he didn't push himself too hard, with his sword arts, his arm would work just fine. Gray frowned. If I can't go all out with my sword, does that mean I need to stop training for a while? Ariel calmly shook her head. Don't worry about it. Training at your normal intensity is perfectly fine. But in reality, Ariel was wrestling with a question she'd never voiced aloud. What kind of swordsmanship could possibly be powerful enough to wound a person's very soul? Gray didn't respond, so she smartly changed gears. After all, history had records of techniques that were powered by the soul itself. Ariel's expression became dead serious. That man is Amy White. You're familiar with him, right? A jolt shot through Gray's entire body. He nodded. I am. But the question itself made him uneasy. Why bring up the Sword Saint now of all times? At this point in the timeline, they shouldn't have ever crossed paths. But Ariel was convinced. The way Gray handled his sword had a clear signature, something he could only have picked up from Amy White. It was far too identical to be a fluke, and yet when she looked closer, she detected a subtle variation. The one who taught you seems even stronger than Amy. Her brows knitted in confusion. That being said, in another few years, Amy should be just as monstrously strong as your master. Her insane perception genuinely shocked Gray. She had put together way more than he anticipated. But no matter how sharp her instincts were, she could never in a million years guess the truth that Gray learned swordsmanship from an Amy who was 10 years in the future. He couldn't tell her that. All he could offer was that he trained at a dojo in his hometown. But can swordsmanship actually tear up the soul? Ariel shot back without a moment's hesitation. That's impossible. Normal sword techniques can't even scratch the soul. For one, a regular strike could never drop an ogre general in a single hit, much less obliterate everything in its path, including monsters and trees. She was referencing the moment Gray had slaughtered the ogre general. Obviously, she was already aware of what went down. Ariel let out a soft chuckle. And that's exactly why our little bet was basically a guaranteed win for me. She had personally surveyed some of the aftermath. The sheer destruction was spectacular, far beyond what even the most advanced cleaving magic could ever hope to accomplish. That's how she deduced that some hidden power was dormant inside Gray, and that he'd tapped into it. Her logic was terrifyingly close to the real story. Gray couldn't shake the thought that if Ariel truly saw everything, things were about to get real complicated. Her pupils shifted again. I can see it. Power leaking out from a door that's bound in chains. A knot of ice formed in Gray's stomach. For the first time, a real chilling certainty washed over him. Ariel was not normal. She had seen the gateway inside of him. That wasn't a lucky guess. It wasn't something anyone could just figure out. She was hiding something big. Ariel held up a single finger, her voice unnervingly steady. I've run into powers that feel like yours before. I'm not saying they're identical, but the vibe they give off, it's practically the same. As soon as the words left her mouth, Gray pounced. What exactly is this power you're talking about? Are you trying to tell me there are others like me? Others who have this same kind of ability, Ariel answered, without even a flicker of hesitation. Yes, though whether you can still call them human is debatable. They're known as the Purgers. That's the name they go by. Gray's composure completely shattered. How in the world did Ariel know so much, and why was the name Purgers even being spoken in this era? It was way too soon. Ariel's eyes were locked on his face. You recognize the name, don't you? She pressed calmly. Judging by your reaction, that's a definite yes. To be honest, I didn't realize they were so well known. But then again, seeing as you're familiar with some seriously next-gen magical theories, I guess it tracks. The comment made Gray squirm. In reality, those theories were just plain facts from a future that hadn't even been written yet. Ariel leaned forward, her curiosity piqued. How much do you know about the Purgers? Lay it all on me. Gray froze. Could he really drop that kind of truth bomb on her? She'd probably think he was insane. But there was one thing he knew for sure. The Purgers were a catastrophic threat to humanity, wielding power on a completely broken level. They had to be eliminated before they even appeared. And if that wasn't an option, they had to be annihilated no matter the sacrifice. After a moment of heavy silence, Ariel nodded. Your stance is extreme, but I agree. They are an incredible danger. Despite that, Varian Bradley is still dead set on pushing forward with his experiments. Gray's mind was reeling. That psycho. You're telling me he's actually involved in this? Ariel let out a cold, humorless laugh. Involved? Oh, it's much bigger than that. He's at the very heart of it. From the intel she had, the Purgers were the exact entities Varian had been trying to summon into their world. Gray's blood ran cold. The Purgers were something humans were trying to create. Then why had he never heard a single word about this in his original timeline? His mind raced, and a deeply unsettling memory clicked into place. Back in his first life, the Academy had always acted like it knew exactly when and where the Purgers would emerge. A horrifying possibility slammed into Gray, sending a jolt of pure ice through his veins. What if the Academy hadn't just been fighting them? What if they were involved in the summoning from the very beginning? If that gut feeling was right, then the Academy itself was ground zero for the entire catastrophe. Before he could even process the thought, Gray blurted out, "You have to stop the experiment." To his utter shock, Ariel was on the exact same page. The problem was the professor in charge of the project had the same rank she did. She had no power to shut him down or pull the plug on his research. In fact, Ariel had already gone to the higher-ups and pressured them to cancel it, but they had completely blown her off. The revelation made Gray wonder who the hell these higher-ups really were. On this issue, even Ariel's hands were tied. Gray simply didn't have the clearance to know. And without a direct order from the top, no one could force the experiment to grind to a halt. Gray sighed in frustration. They won't even give a name. The Academy's leadership is a deeper cesspool than I ever imagined. Then a new idea sparked. If they could just prove that Madman was a criminal, that would shut down everything right in his previous life. Varian Bradley's illegal experiments racked up a body count in the tens of thousands, and Gray knew the exact location where he'd conducted them. With that crucial piece of knowledge, he quickly pitched his plan to Ariel. I know where he's running his illegal experiments. If we can bust him red-handed, we might be able to end this for good. Ariel shot the idea down instantly. That's not going to work. Breaking into a professor's research facility without authorization is a major felony. If you don't walk in there with ironclad proof, the only people going to prison will be us, she stated bluntly. Unless you're holding that proof right now. Her words stopped, Gray dead in his tracks. He had nothing. No hard evidence. And without it, this was a dead end for now. With that topic closed, Ariel pivoted back to Gray's abilities. So do you want to learn how to control that power of yours? The question hit him like a physical blow. Was she being serious? Was it actually possible for him to tame this power inside him? She shook her head. I can't teach you. But there is a professor here at the Academy whose entire specialty is dealing with unknown forces. His name is Siskit. Gray's breath hitched. Siskit, as in the legendary master who had personally trained the Sword Saint. Ariel had clearly anticipated his shock. Tomorrow I'll set you up to begin private training with him. Gray was practically screaming in his head. This was it. This was the entire reason he had come to the Academy, to finally gain control over his own devastating power. And just like that, a lead materialized way faster than he ever could have hoped. The very next day, Gray was thrown into a special training regimen, guided by a legitimate monster. His instructor was none other than the legendary Siskit Langfellow, who was coaching him in an exclusive one-on-one session. But what threw Gray for a loop was that this so-called training was literally just running. He had zero clue what Siskit was even trying to accomplish. But one thing was clear, his job was just to shut up and obey. In that instant, Siskit's head snapped around. Your mind is wandering. I can feel it. You've lost your focus. If you've got enough brain power left to daydream, you've got enough energy to run harder. Siskit's voice was ice. The power of the soul only awakens when every last ounce of your stamina has been incinerated. As long as you have a single drop of strength left, we don't even think about touching a sword. Got it, Gray kinda sorta got the gist, even if the whole concept was still fuzzy. He was all in. After all, the man barking orders at him was one of the strongest dudes alive. So Gray survived an entire week of this brutal, soul-crushing training. As soon as it was over, Gray headed back to Ariel, who immediately asked how his session with Siskit went. Gray just shrugged awkwardly. Honestly, it felt like nothing. I just ran all day, every day, but I can't deny my body feels way tougher now. As for the sword stuff, we barely touched on it right at the end. Ariel let out a small laugh. Yep, that sounds exactly like something that old man would do. Their conversation was cut short when someone else entered the room. A woman holding a sealed letter presented it to Ariel. Gray couldn't tell if he was imagining it, but as Ariel's eyes scanned the page, a tremor ran through her entire body. A heartbeat later, her expression contorted into pure, unfiltered rage. Gray was instantly at her side. What's wrong? What does the letter say? But when Gray took the letter and read it for himself, his own face turned to stone. The message was a bureaucratic nightmare. It claimed that while Bella had made progress with super-compressed ether, the official inspection had decided it didn't meet the standards for true compression. Therefore, her work was officially rejected, with the final decision credited to Varian Bradley. A firestorm of rage erupted inside Gray. He couldn't stop a curse from escaping his lips. That guy is a complete psycho. Ariel motioned for him to chill. It was obvious what was happening. Varian Bradley was dead set on forcing Bella into that surgery. Even though she totally didn't need it anymore, Gray offered the obvious fix. So just have Bella say no. Unfortunately, it wasn't that simple. A contract was already signed and it was ironclad unless Bradley himself decided to tear it up. Bella was trapped between two impossible choices: get kicked out of the academy or go through with the surgery. The words sent an icy chill down Gray's spine. If Bella submitted to that procedure, her entire future would be torched. The next second, Ariel slammed her fist down on the desk. Her gaze was like steel. Gray, I'm going to need your help. Her plan was simple. She needed the location of Bradley's lab. If she could unearth the proof of his crimes, the contract would be null and void. A faint smile played on Gray's lips. Weren't you the one who told me that going in without evidence was reckless? He teased. So what happened to being scared? The reason for Ariel's sudden courage was simple. She trusted him. She knew if they could just find that lab, the evidence would be there. Maybe on some level she'd believed him from the very start. Her own eyes had shown her the truth of the world. Now she was certain. Everything Gray had warned her about was real. It just took her this long to finally admit it. Gray's reply was cool and collected. You should have trusted me from the jump. From here on out, I need you to believe me. I won't ever lie to you. Ariel nodded, urging him to lead the way right then and there. Then let's do this together, she declared, and expose that man for everything he's done. Gray didn't mince words. The lab was stashed away in the mountains near Torwall Village. Ariel knew the place. What shocked her was that Bradley would hide his operation near such a tiny backwater town, but Gray knew exactly what he was doing. Bradley was running his sick, illegal experiments from inside a facility that had official government approval. Ariel had to admit it was the perfect hiding spot for his twisted research. And more importantly, the academy had a strict policy of never snooping around another professor's lab. As long as they could get their hands on concrete proof, they couldn't be hit with trespassing charges. At that very moment, the door swung open, and Bella walked in, her face etched with worry. Professor Gray, I got one of these letters today too. Ariel moved like a flash, plucking the letter from Bella's fingers before it could drop. She looked Bella straight in the eye. Don't you worry about a thing. Gray and I are going to handle this. But Bella had already put two and two together. Professor, she asked, her voice trembling, are you really going to go up against him? For me, all by yourself. Ariel paused, the slightest hint of a smirk touching her lips as she turned to face Bella again. Her voice was steady and absolute. I'm all that's needed. But that answer did nothing to calm Bella's fears. Her eyes darted instinctively to Gray for support. That's when Gray spoke up, telling Ariel to hold on. He wanted in. Bella immediately backed him up. This was her future on the line. There was no way she was sitting this out. Ariel looked like a major headache was setting in. You guys don't get it, she said, her tone grim. We're talking about a lunatic who has a long history of performing dangerous experiments on people. If that man gets his hands on either of you, there's no telling what horrors he'll unleash. I am not letting you walk into that kind of danger. Gray immediately shot that down. And you think going in by yourself is any safer, he challenged. That's a straight-up death wish. If I tap into the same power I used to demolish that ogre general, I can absolutely provide the backup you need. Besides, if you get taken out, I'm instantly kicked out of God's eye. So please let us decide our own fate. We won't slow you down, we'll be the asset you need. Ariel's gaze shifted between the two of them, a heavy silence hanging in the air before she finally let out an exhausted sigh. From the looks of it, you two would just follow me anyway, even if I said no, she conceded at last. Fine, you can come. But there's one non-negotiable rule. Your lives come first, no matter what happens. Gray and Bella gave a sharp simultaneous nod. They didn't need to be told twice. Shortly after, the trio made their way toward the mountain. Following Gray's lead, they soon stood before a desolate building, causing Bella to hesitate. Is he really running his twisted experiments from a place like this? Ariel cut her off. It didn't matter what it looked like. What mattered was getting inside and finding proof. Gray's voice was cold with conviction. I'm positive. He's inside. His unwavering certainty made Ariel and Bella's expressions harden with resolve. If you're that sure, they replied, then we're with you. Ariel then shared a sliver of good news. Varian Bradley was supposedly scheduled to be at a Magic Association meeting, meaning their target wasn't even on site. The catch, however, was that the main entrance was almost certainly loaded with traps. They'd have to find a way in through the side. From here on out, Ariel took command, making it crystal clear that their #1 priority was to secure undeniable evidence. Just then, Bella wavered again, asking, "Professor, are you really going to these lengths for me? Is someone like me really worth all this risk?" Before Ariel could even form a response, Gray cut in sharply. "You're looking at this all wrong," he stated firmly. "Shutting down his experiments is for the entire world, not just for you. You get that right." A second later, on Ariel's command, all three lunged into action, with Gray moving like a blur, outpacing the others to take the lead. In that same instant, wild flames began to coalesce in Ariel's hand. With one fluid gesture, she unleashed a volley of fireballs that slammed into the building's side. The wall instantly erupted into dust and rubble. The sheer destructive force of her magic was breathtaking. A single, almost casual spell had caused catastrophic damage. Gray was momentarily stunned. Weren't they supposed to be sneaking in? This was the exact opposite of subtle. With a massive, gaping hole torn into the structure, the three of them charged into the building's interior. But the moment Gray laid eyes on what was inside, he froze solid. The lab was a charnel house littered with the corpses of Bradley's countless test subjects. Ariel's original plan was to meticulously hunt for clues, but a single sweeping glance confirmed the horrifying truth: the evidence was everywhere. That's when their eyes caught something else further in. Standing ominously in the distance was a structure that could only be an altar. Bella's resolve faltered. What's the plan now? Do we grab the proof and bail, or do we try to save anyone who might still be alive? Gray immediately spun toward her. This place is a death trap. If we waste any more time, Varian could walk in at any second. The very instant he finished speaking, an unfamiliar voice echoed from behind them as a dark figure slowly stepped out from the shadows. "Were you just calling my name?" As Ariel recognized the silhouette, her voice became dangerously calm. "So Varian, how did that meeting of yours go?" The man emerging from the darkness was none other than the depraved mastermind himself, Professor Varian Bradley. Gray immediately snapped into a combat stance, his mind reeling. He never in a million years expected Varian to actually be here. Varian answered smoothly, "Oh, I sent a proxy to that tedious meeting. My work here is far too important." Leaving was never really on the table. A deep frown creased Ariel's brow. "And what exactly is this important experiment you're conducting?" As it turned out, Varian had just received a fresh shipment of materials and was eager to begin testing them while they were still viable. Unfortunately for him, their little home invasion had just forced a major change in his schedule. Even Ariel's face went rigid. A wave of pure killing intent washed over them. Gray, however, was unnervingly composed. They had stumbled upon a secret they were never meant to see. Being permanently silenced was now a certainty. Varian's cold eyes locked onto the trio. He had no idea how they'd pinpointed his lab's location, but he was absolutely certain of one thing: they hadn't alerted anyone else before they came. That meant if the three of them simply disappeared right here, the trail would go cold and no one would ever suspect him. Bella was practically frozen solid with terror. Ariel's annoyance boiled over. "Don't tell me you're actually planning to make us your next test subjects." Varian let out a soft, chilling chuckle. "Don't be so melodramatic. Your sacrifice will help push the very limits of magic itself. Since I can't allow you to leave here alive, I'll simply ensure your bodies are put to the greatest possible use." In the next heartbeat, a massive fireball shot directly at Varian's face. The explosive point-blank attack clearly caught Varian by surprise. A thunderous detonation echoed through the lab as the fireball made direct contact. Ariel instinctively shot a look at Bella, shocked that the timid girl had just launched such a decisive attack. Bella's expression was no longer fearful. It was ice-cold and utterly resolute. Zero hesitation in her eyes, just pure burning hatred for Varian. She wasn't just attacking, she was going for the kill. But in a move that shocked everyone, the attack fizzled out, doing zero damage. Varian just smirks, his voice dripping with condescending amusement. "So the god's eye is still as sharp as ever," he taunts. "I gotta say, I never expected your little special admission to pack such a punch." His eyes narrowed to slits. "Guess I'll have to take this a bit more seriously." After all, besides Bella, his gaze slides over to Gray, dripping with pure contempt. "There's another god's eye candidate in the room. Your little tricks are a joke. A bunch of academy kids thinking they can take down a professor. Pathetic." But Bella just scoffs. "It's kill or be killed out here," she snaps back. "My only regret is not turning you into a crater on the first try." Ariel immediately screams for them to pull back. She could feel the entire situation spiraling out of her grasp. More importantly, they got what they came for, the evidence. The Academy could take it from here. Unfortunately, whether they could actually leave wasn't really their call. In a flash, Varian unleashes a torrent of dark magic, rocketing straight for Bella. In the nick of time, Ariel slams a golden barrier into place, screaming at Bella to run. "I can hold him off," she declares, but Varian's voice cuts through the chaos like ice. "Pointless. Meet my little creation, Devouring Flame. A fire that doesn't just break shields. It eats them and turns them into my power. The two spells smash into each other. Spiderweb cracks instantly spread across the golden barrier. In theory, this spell was basically unblockable. Its one and only weakness was that it burned through some seriously rare materials. A few seconds later, Ariel's golden shield was seconds from being completely consumed by the writhing black flames. That's when a piercing blue light erupted from her eyes. A second shimmering blue magic circle materializes right behind the battered golden one. But the dark magic doesn't even flinch. It slams into the new defense without a moment's pause. The cracks reappear, spreading even faster this time. Bella, the spell memory band, now Ariel demands. Ariel had been recording the whole insane fight. Once Cisco saw this footage, he'd know exactly what was up. But Bella isn't moving. Instead, she smashes the butt of her staff into the ground, with her as the epicenter. A brand new defensive circle explodes outwards. Ariel is floored. What are you doing? I told you to get the hell out of here. But there was no way Bella was ditching her mentor. She saw the cracks, spiderwebbing across Ariel's shield, and stepped up to back her play. Ariel grits her teeth in frustration. We had a plan. We agreed. If things went south, your safety was the priority. This magic, it's not natural. I'll buy you time now, go. But the words barely leave her lips before her own defensive circle shatters into a million pieces. Pure fear flashes in Ariel's eyes. 2 minutes. It broke through in just 2 minutes. There's something seriously wrong with that spell. But as Ariel's defense crumbles, Bella is the picture of calm. Even if your shield is gone. Professor, it doesn't matter. The black flames roared forward, slamming head-on into Bella's magic. From her point of view, Varian's spell wasn't some unbeatable god-tier magic. It just required a completely different defensive game plan. Varian is absolutely floored. That's impossible. The only people who know the counter theory for Devouring Flame are on my team. How in the world could you know it? Bella just lets out a small laugh. Funny story. Someone taught me a new theory not too long ago, and with it, every single magic formula out there looks almost stupidly simple. Hearing that, Varian's lip twitches in fury. You're telling me you broke my ultimate dark magic, with nothing more than a new theory. He wasn't buying it for a second. His voice drops to a deadly whisper. Tell me who the rat is. Snitch and I'll make your death quick. Bella's smile is pure defiance. You want to know who taught me? Sorry, that's one secret I'm not spilling. For a second, Gray is just stunned by Bella's absolute nerve, but his expression hardens in an instant. He stares past her, his voice sharp with warning. This next one was bad. Varian pulls a blood-red crystal from his robes. Without a word, he crushes it in his fist. If you're so eager to die, he snarls, then burn for me. In the next second, more than a dozen skeletal creatures explode from the shattered crystal. They writhe and twist around each other like a nest of snakes, rapidly fusing into a single horrifying mass of bone and shadow. A grotesque, massive jaw unhinges itself from the nightmare creature and lunges straight for Gray. Gray screams another warning, but Bella fires back that she can still hold the line. It's a brave front, but panic is starting to set in. Her mana tank is on empty. Of course, Varian spots it instantly. With what you've got left, he sneers. You'll last another minute tops. Professor, hit him now, Bella yells, her voice strained. I'll pour everything I have into the defense, at her words. That sharp blue light flares in Ariel's eyes again. Her god's eye goes into overdrive, scanning Varian's spell, breaking down its structure at lightning speed, hunting for a single fatal flaw. If she could find it, she could thread an attack right through the barrier. She slowly lifts her hand. A single razor-thin thread of electricity snakes past the shield. It connects. That's all the confirmation she needed. And then, Ariel unleashes hell. A storm of raw power erupts from her, and with a guttural roar, she unleashes a torrent of lightning directly at Varian's encroaching darkness. The blast of electricity surges forward, an attack packing incredible velocity and power, but the outcome is absolutely devastating. The instant her lightning collides with the dark spell, it's just swallowed, completely snuffed out of existence. Varian just scoffs. A counterattack. Don't kid yourself. At this rate, you're not even going to lay a finger on me. A chilling realization washes over Ariel. That dark magic, its ability to consume energy, is on another level. And if she remembered right, her own offensive power was ranked the lowest among the entire faculty. Varian was clearly using his fire attribute to literally absorb her attacks. At that exact moment, Bella finally reached her limit. She gasped, her voice strained. I'm running on fumes. What's the plan? If you looked close, you could see Bella's hands. Her entire frame was shaking uncontrollably. Just staying upright was a monumental effort. Ariel was completely cornered. This is exactly why I told you to get out of here. You guys still have no idea who you're messing with. The situation had spiraled into a full-blown crisis, but that's when Gray stepped into the fray. He gave a faint smile. I'll take it from here. You two get some rest. It's time for the backup to finally step onto the stage. Both Ariel and Bella were completely floored. You're saying you can handle what we couldn't. Bella's voice was dripping with disbelief. Your sword can't even get close to him. Gray just shrugged. Doesn't matter, just watch. But Ariel's expression shifted. She knew what was coming. Are you absolutely sure about this? Unleashing that power again, it could literally kill you. And even if you make it, that arm of yours might be wrecked for good. Hearing this, Gray offered a gentle smile. I'd rather it just be me than all three of us biting the dust here. Meanwhile, Varian, blinded by his own swirling vortex of dark magic, couldn't see a thing. But he could sense a crimson light beginning to bloom. Then he saw it, a young man swinging a sword through the air. But the world was upside down. And the reason his entire world had been flipped on its head, it was because Gray had just sliced it clean off his shoulders. In one single fluid motion, Gray ended Varian's life. The sheer force of that swing was something Varian couldn't even comprehend, let alone block. Gray's face was now a mask of cold fury. Someone like you should have been put down a long time ago. All that remained was Varian's headless corpse still standing. Bella was in total shock. That single attack had just shattered her entire understanding of the world. Thud. Varian's body and his severed head hit the ground simultaneously. Even Ariel, who had witnessed the aftermath of the Ogre General fight, found her eyes going wide. Seeing it happen live was a whole other level of insane. If you tried to tell this story to anyone, they'd call you a liar. It was just that unbelievable. And in that moment, Bella noticed dust and pebbles raining down from above. A split second later, the entire ceiling gave way, and massive slabs of rock came plummeting down on them. The shockwave from that one sword strike had compromised the entire structure. Just then, light footsteps echoed, and with each step, ethereal ripples spread across the floor. In the next instant, countless beams of pink laser-like energy shot up from the ground, flash freezing every single chunk of falling debris in midair. Professor Ariel was still reeling from the shock of Gray's impossible feat. Varian's magic had her completely locked down, but cleaning up this mess, it was child's play by comparison. Her gaze then shifted back to Gray. By the way, she started, how are you holding up? That attack. It was way stronger than I was expecting. With a hollow clang, the sword slipped from Gray's grasp and hit the stone floor. He didn't even know why. All he knew was a searing agony was pulsing through his dominant hand. A paralyzing numbness followed the pain. He bent down, scooped his sword back up, and said, "Don't worry about me. I can still move." Seeing this, Ariel let out a small laugh. Well, that's a huge improvement from last time. Looks like all that training is actually starting to stick. Gray couldn't help but agree. If the me from back in the village had tried that move, I'd probably just be dealing with a sore arm right now. Back then, I would have been out cold for days, and I couldn't even feel my arm when I woke up. Guess that week, with the Sword Saint, was worth it after all. But Gray had no idea that Professor Ariel's full attention was now laser-focused on his right hand. A moment ago, she'd used her God's Eye to scan the internal structure of his arm again, and what she saw was fresh, devastating damage. She walked over to him, her voice soft. "We only survived because of you, but I'm so sorry you had to tap into that power again." Gray just brushed it off. "Don't be. I'm the one who was dead set on stopping Varian Bradley, remember?" But Professor Ariel was insistent on thanking him properly, and her next words made Gray's blood run cold. She begged him not to use that ability again, at least for now. Her voice was almost pleading. "Please, you have to trust my God's Eye on this. If you don't listen, the damage to your arm, it could become permanent." Hearing that, Gray froze for a second before finally nodding, showing he understood. Just then, Bella spoke up from behind them, her voice full of confusion. "That thing you did, was that magic? Because if it was, how come I didn't sense a single flicker of ether?" Honestly, trying to explain that level of destructive power with the word magic felt ridiculous. "So what in the world was that power you used?" But before she could press any further, Ariel cut her off. "I'm sorry, but I'm going to need you to drop this. And look what you witnessed in here. It stays in here. Not one word to anyone." But Bella, with the relentless curiosity of a toddler, just kept hammering him with questions. With a quiet sigh of defeat, Ariel lifted her hand, arcs of magic already crackling around her fingertips. Her entire demeanor shifted, growing deadly serious as she leveled her gaze at Bella. "If you can't agree to keep this quiet, then I'll be forced to simply wipe your memories. You get two choices, memory, erasure, or a magic contract." The ultimatum hit Bella like a physical blow. Obviously, losing her memories was a hard pass, so the magic contract was a no-brainer. The moment Bella agreed, Ariel instantly conjured the magical document, letting it shimmer in the air right in front of Bella. Without a single moment of hesitation, Bella scribbled her name, sealing the deal. The interrogation was officially over. Ariel then pivoted to Gray, asking him what the next move should be. Gray admitted that, while the twisted experiments were a massive problem, their number one priority had to be freeing these poor souls. They might look like nothing more than lifeless husks, but in reality, they were just paralyzed by a powerful magical hypnosis. Ariel snapped her fingers. "They're not on the brink of death, but to play it safe. We need to get them to the Academy's medical wing." In the blink of an eye, a massive orb of golden light blazed into existence before them. The brilliant light cascaded over every test subject, wrapping them in a temporary shield against any further harm. With the victims out of immediate danger, Ariel suggested they press on with the investigation. But as she scanned the horrific scene again, the depravity of it all was still hard to process. These weren't just experiments, they were atrocities. Nearly every single one involved human sacrifice, all to cook up magical catalysts or artificially boost someone's power. Each procedure was more stomach-churning than the last. But Ariel couldn't find a single experiment linked to the purger, which sparked a chilling question. Were the real experiments happening somewhere else? Gray felt that same gnawing unease from his past life. He knew this exact location had been ground zero for a catastrophe that vaporized tens of thousands of people. There was just no way that cooking up a few magical items could unleash that kind of devastation. And then it slammed into him a flash of memory from his previous life. The force that annihilated all those people. It wasn't magic. It was a toxic miasma that erupted from deep underground. The realization struck him like lightning. He yelled out to Ariel and Bella, who were already ahead. Bella glanced back, confused. "Did you just have a breakthrough or something? You look super intense." And for good reason. A cold dread was crawling up Gray's spine. He could feel that something monstrous was lurking just beneath their feet. If the purger was actually down there, the discovery would change everything. He quickly laid out his theory for Ariel, proposing there had to be a hidden passage leading underground. Ariel shot a skeptical look at the floor. That seemed like a long shot. Who would be crazy enough to build a whole research facility under the earth? My God's eye is scanning every single crack in the ground. But frustratingly, it came up with nothing. Zero hidden pathways. Gray's theory was looking more and more like a bust, just as Ariel was about to call it. Her gaze suddenly locked onto something. She immediately ordered Gray and Bella to stay put, then sprinted forward alone. Dropping to a crouch, she examined a specific spot on the floor with laser focus. The power of her God's eye flared to life again. The traces were incredibly faint, but she found it the lingering energy of a short-range teleportation spell. This might lead to a pocket dimension, a place you can only enter via teleportation. Judging by the faint energy signatures, the jump distance was about 300 meters, and whatever was on the other side had to be massive. After she laid it all out, Gray immediately asked if she could get them to a point 300 meters straight down. Ariel smirked. "I can definitely open a portal for that." With a sharp snap of her fingers, she declared, "Then let's find out." In an instant, a glowing magic circle materialized before them. If there was really nothing on the other side, the portal would just open up into a wall of solid rock. A few tense moments later, the teleportation gate Ariel summoned rippled and swung open. The sight that greeted them left all three completely speechless. Spread out before them was a vast complex of buildings ranging from small structures to larger facilities. Ariel just stared, completely floored. Nobody could have possibly imagined that such a colossal hidden space existed deep beneath this lab. In that same moment, a chill ran down Bella's spine as she sensed something was terribly wrong. Colossal waves of ether were pouring in from all directions, but the energy readings coming from the center were off the charts, where the power was so dense it was almost suffocating. The spot she was pointing to was a small building right at the epicenter of the complex, a structure completely encircled by several towering pillars. A look of pure shock flashed across Ariel's eyes. This isn't just ether. There's another power source tangled up in it. Something fundamentally different from magic. It was leaking from that central point, and its raw, untamed power was on a scale beyond anything she had ever encountered. Hearing her description, Gray already had a sickening feeling he knew the answer. That alien power. Could it be? Ariel cut him off before he could even say the word. "You're right. The power sealed inside that chamber is the power of the purger." The three of them ventured deeper into the hidden facility, coming to a stop before a single ominous door. A gut instinct told all three of them that the source of that overwhelming energy was waiting just beyond that threshold. Ariel meticulously scanned their surroundings, confirming that the presence of that power here was undeniable. But the purger itself was nowhere to be seen. Ariel reached for the door, her hand pressing against the cold slab, but it refused to budge. It hit her instantly. The door held no real power. It was just a prop, a symbolic piece in some twisted ritual. This meant the energy wasn't seeping from behind it. Ariel's gaze snapped to a violet container-like contraption humming ominously nearby. She concluded that the true power core was stashed inside that magical apparatus. What she did next was completely off the rails. Watching her, Gray's jaw dropped. "Are you insane? Are you seriously trying to summon the purger?" Bella also sensed the immense danger radiating from the device. She instinctively lunged forward to stop her, but Ariel's voice was ice. "Don't move. My gods, I already checked it out. This thing can't actually summon the purger, so there's no need to freak out." A deafening crack tore through the air, as if reality itself was being ripped apart. The fracture widened in an instant, exposing nothing but a void of pure, pitch-black darkness. Gray and Bella could only stare speechless as space itself was fractured before them. "Professor, what did you do?" But under Ariel's command, slender tendrils of black energy began to snake out. From the depths of the rift, Gray stared, his eyes glued to the dark energy. There was zero doubt. This was the Purger's power. And in that moment, the entire truth crashed down on Ariel. The device was never designed to summon the Purger. Its real job was to punch a tiny hole into the edge of the Purger's domain and siphon off the leaking energy. At the room's center, a mass of black energy swirled restlessly, pulsing as if it had a life of its own. The core used to crystallize that terrifying power was almost certainly human life itself. From the traces left behind, at least 10 souls had been devoured, and in the shaping process, it was likely that far more lives were sacrificed. Every single one of these conclusions came from what Ariel witnessed through her god's eye. Based on her scan, a huge chunk of the people they'd seen upstairs had already been rounded up and used as raw material. Bella's brow furrowed, her mind reeling. Why would they go to all this trouble just to stockpile power? What in the world are they even planning to do with it? Ariel told her to remember. Their fight with the professor, reminding her how Varian's black flames felt so deeply wrong, so unnatural. That black fire, she laid out, was born from the red crystal, the finished product of these horrific experiments. But let's be real. Catalysts like this wouldn't just be limited to flames. If they started mass-producing this stuff, there's no telling what horrors they could unleash. As she spoke, the rift in reality began to slowly seal itself shut. After hearing Ariel's breakdown, Gray began to suspect Varian never had any intention of actually summoning the Purger from the start. Whether he just hadn't tried, or simply wasn't capable, was impossible to know. What was obvious now was that this space-rending magical device had been pushed to its absolute limit. Whatever system they had rigged up was already running on fumes. Bella glanced at the complex machinery surrounding them. To her, the entire setup was a priceless marvel. She'd never witnessed spatial distortion magic with this level of precision and raw output. Ariel gave a slight nod. You're right. Building even one of these would completely bankrupt an entire nation. And yet, there are 8 of them, sitting right here. Only a single organization could pull this off. Bella guessed it had to be the Discar Empire. But that theory crumbled almost immediately. Even as one of the world's superpowers, the Empire just didn't have the magical R and to build even one of these monsters. If it's not the Discar Empire, Bella murmured, then what nation could possibly afford? This Ariel's answer was chillingly calm. It had to be an organization whose magical research completely eclipses that of any empire. Gray spoke up, his voice grim. You mean the World Union Academy, don't you? I can't think of anyone else. The name hit Bella like a physical blow. That's impossible. The World Union Academy. Ariel's voice was unwavering. You heard him right. This is the work of the World Union Academy. No other research institution could possibly support this scale, or this budget. It looks like the Purger is tied way more closely to the Academy than we ever dared to imagine. Bella, struggling to wrap her head around it, finally voiced the impossible thought. Are you saying, the Academy has been pulling all the strings from the shadows, but the World Union Academy, they're supposed to be the ones protecting the world from threats like this? Ariel heaved a quiet sigh. You're still way too naive. I don't get why you refuse to see it, but there is no other organization on the planet capable of this. Do you get it now? Gray offered a different take. That doesn't mean the entire Academy is our enemy. Most of its people are still fighting for humanity. At least before I was reborn, the Academy's strongest warriors were always the ones on the front lines. They never cowered behind others. They held the line and became the absolute core of the resistance against the Purger. A force so powerful, they surpassed even the suppression squads. They protected civilians right up until the very end. After seeing that, future myself, I refuse to believe the Academy itself is humanity's enemy. Ariel nodded. You're not wrong. Most of the people inside the Academy probably think they're fighting for humanity, and they'd never sign off on experiments that just throw away lives like this. But the Academy has thousands of researchers. Every single one of them has their own twisted sense of justice, and different beliefs lead to different darker paths. On top of that, you have all these hidden facilities. The truth is, nobody really knows the full picture of what the Academy is. The person pulling Varian's strings has some serious juice. There's no way Varian could have set up an operation this massive on his own, Bella added, her voice laced with worry. So what did that mean? They couldn't trust the Academy at all? If that was true, weren't they always going to be one step behind? Ariel's eyes glazed over, looking into the past. I've watched this place from the inside for decades, and I know one thing for sure. This is not an organization you can just blindly put your faith in. Sure, most of them probably think they're building a better future for humanity. I bet even the psycho behind this whole scheme told themselves the same thing. But the real truth is always buried deep in the shadows, where no one can ever touch it. Gray then urged Ariel to scan the area, desperate for any clue that could point them to the puppet master. But it was a ghost town. The facility was completely stripped of any communication gear. Even the creator's magical signature had been meticulously scrubbed away, leaving the scene so sterile it was impossible to track. And if that wasn't bad enough, there was another problem. Just as Ariel was about to explain, a deafening explosion ripped through the air right behind Bella. The shockwave sent Gray stumbling. For a second, he was completely disoriented, trying to process what just happened. It didn't take long to realize the blasts weren't targeting them. They were a self-destruct sequence. Ariel sized up the situation in an instant. It looks like they even rigged up a system to wipe all the evidence. They didn't just blow the place right away. They were probably hoping to lure any intruders inside first, then set it off, and bury all the witnesses in one fiery grave. Watching Ariel break it all down like some kind of master detective, Bella finally snapped. "This isn't the time for a TED Talk. We need to get the hell out of here now." Ariel just smirked. "You're getting way too worked up, little one. These are just simple, magic-based explosives." She slammed her palm flat against the ground. Professors at the World Union Academy are a little too tough to be taken out by a cheap trick like this. As she spoke, a brilliant golden light spiderwebbed across the floor. "If a little boom like this could kill me, I'd have no business teaching you." In the blink of an eye, that golden radiance coiled around the three of them, intensifying with blinding speed. With a sharp whoosh, the trio vanished on the spot, taking the 8 magical artifacts with them. 3 seconds later, on the grass outside the building, Ariel teleported Gray, Bella, and a handful of survivors onto the open field. Gray scanned the survivors. They were all alive, just like them, but you could see the trauma etched on their faces. Bella finally exhaled a shaky breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. She seriously thought she was about to die. It was only because of her professor's teleportation magic that they were still breathing. Gray couldn't shake the feeling of how close they'd come to the edge. Ariel just chuckled. "You'll get used to this kind of chaos after it happens a few more times. We grabbed more loot than I expected, so the teleport took a bit more juice, but it was worth it. We got all 8 of the devices. Once we slap these on the Academy's desk, there's no way they can keep looking the other way." Shortly after the team made it back to the Academy, the professor sitting opposite them broke the silence. "The survivors you rescued are getting medical attention at the Academy's treatment center right now. The man before them was the top dog of the World Union Academy headmaster Oridum Alexander. I owe you my gratitude for shutting down Varian's illegal experiments." He then lifted a report detailing the magical engines. "Each one of these things is worth more than an entire nation's annual budget." At that, Ariel's face hardened. "There are 8 of them here. There is no way Varian could have gotten his hands on this kind of firepower alone. How did he get them? Who was backing him?" Alexander slowly placed the document on the table, his voice grim. "These devices were stolen, hijacked during transport. 78 personnel were assigned to guard them, and every single one was slaughtered." The bombshell left the 3 of them completely floored. None of them imagined this would be tied to a massive bloody heist. Ariel's gaze turned to ice. "You're talking about the incident from 15 years ago, aren't you?" Alexander gave a slow nod. "That's right. Those engines were part of the shipment that was hit back then, and the ones who did it were the Blood Wipers. I trust you've heard the name." Of course Gray had. They were the most notorious criminal organization on the planet, a plague that had seeped into every crack of society. No matter how many times they got stomped out, they just kept crawling back from the shadows. In that moment, Gray noticed a sudden shift in Bella's energy and glanced over at her. What he saw sent a chill down his spine. The usually gentle Bella was wearing a look of pure, murderous rage. "They're the ones who killed my parents," she seethed. Alexander just rubbed his temples. "It's the very reason they're like ghosts. You can crush them 100 times and they just rematerialize from the shadows. Nobody knows their base, and their true leader is a complete mystery. The scariest part. It's estimated that over 70% of all crime-related deaths on the planet can be traced back to their organization. Honestly, I wouldn't even be shocked to learn their agents are already walking these halls. But here's the catch. We have no solid way to ID them, and without concrete proof, the Academy's administration won't lift a finger." Gray, completely lost, just had to ask what he was even hearing. "Wait. If there are literal criminals here, shouldn't we be kicking them out?" But before Alexander could answer, Ariel stepped in, her voice low but carrying an ironclad certainty. "That's just the way this place works now. If you've got the talent, you get a shot to level up. Doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, or what you've done. That's the school's new motto. So yeah, even if you're a straight-up villain, that doesn't get you an automatic boot." To Bella, this whole concept was completely insane. If someone's a bad guy, shouldn't you deal with them? And Alexander actually vibed with what she was saying, but it was clear the real powers that be at the Academy had a totally different take. Bella had to ask the obvious question. "So, you're telling me the headmaster isn't even part of the real leadership?" Alexander just cracked this uneasy smile. "I just carry out the orders. I'm definitely not what you'd call the top brass around here." He explained it slowly. While he might be the public face of the Academy, the actual power he held was practically zero. A total joke. You want to know who's really pulling the strings? Gray and Bella both snapped their heads in a nod. They were dying to know who the puppet master was. But Alexander wasn't about to just spill the tea. "Just focus on getting stronger," he told them. "The more powerful you become, the more access you're granted. Only when you have enough raw power can you even get close to the Academy's inner circle. Once you're there, the answers you're looking for will find you. He wouldn't drop a name, but he did give them a massive hint. There's a senior here, someone with enough clout to change the entire course of this institution. Even this insane new rule about letting in criminals, that was his call. And finally, it all clicked for Gray. If he could just become more powerful than this mystery person, he could actually change the Academy from the inside out. Alexander didn't say another word. He just nodded. That's pretty much the long and short of it. Here, power is the only thing that matters. In that moment, both Gray and Bella clenched their fists. You could feel their determination radiating off them. Alexander watched them silently, his own mind racing. For him, a crucial piece of the puzzle was still missing. He knew Ariel couldn't have been part of Varian's plot, which meant the real mastermind had to be one of the other two. It looked like Ariel's God's eye was still razor sharp. The thought alone sent a jolt of excitement through Alexander. He couldn't wait to see what kind of absolute beast Ariel was going to forge. After they left Alexander's office, Gray found himself walking solo through the Academy's halls. His eyes drifted down to the dark symbol on the back of his hand. In a place like this, it was crystal clear that strength was the ultimate currency, whether he was taking down the Purger or exposing the Academy's hidden truths. Right now, he had one single mission: get stronger, period. But just as that thought solidified, a sharp sound ripped him from his focus. Gray's head snapped up just in time to see a foot rocketing towards his face. He threw up a block, the impact echoing with a heavy thud. But the force of the blow still sent him stumbling back. The raw power behind it was insane. Even after catching the hit, Gray's feet scraped against the floor as he was pushed back even further. The staggering force of that one kick left him completely baffled. Why would someone just jump him out of the blue like this? If this dude didn't have a damn good reason, Gray was going to consider it a direct challenge. And he wasn't about to play nice. The student finally opened his mouth, his voice dripping with ice, and declared that Gray had zero right to even be standing in this hallway. His excuse was beyond weak. A special admission case from the God's Eye like you doesn't belong here. Slowly, Gray's hand went to his sword. Looked like he'd found another hater who had a problem with special admissions. Except this was the first time someone had the guts to straight up ambush him in a corridor. But just as Gray was about to clap back, the guy suddenly looked almost disappointed, muttering he would have loved to throw down if the rejector hadn't shown up. Gray glanced over his shoulder to see Ariel strolling towards them, not a care in the world. He shot a confused look back at the student, trying to figure out what this guy's deal was. As soon as the attacker was out of the hallway, his mind lit up. The surveillance is too thick here. I can't get any closer, his thoughts raced. But don't worry, I'll send more people soon. It was clear from his mental chatter he was secretly reporting to someone. But who? Only he knew the answer to that. By the time Ariel reached him, she asked what the hell that was all about. Gray just shrugged, admitting he had no clue either. Some rando just tried to kick my head off, he explained, saying that someone who got in through the gauntlet program has no right to be walking around the academy. Ariel took a quick analytical scan of the scene. No weapons were drawn. There was no real argument, and Gray was unharmed, which meant, according to the rules, her hands were tied. There was nothing she could officially do. She gestured toward where the student had bolted, a playful smirk on her face. So why didn't you chase him down and absolutely rock his world? The question totally blindsided Gray. We're classmates. Isn't that a little extra? Ariel just let out a soft sigh. As your professor, I can't officially give that the green light, but if something were to go down nearby, I'm not always the most observant person. Hearing the blatant permission in her voice, Gray decided to let it slide. He wasn't looking to start more drama. There was one thing Ariel was still trying to figure out, and she couldn't help but ask. Are the God's Eye special admits really getting that much hate? Gray just nodded. People throw shade sometimes. This is just the first time someone actually tried to throw hands. Ariel had to double-check. So they're straight up dissing you to your face. A flicker of guilt washed over her expression. I'm so sorry. If I just had a little more pull in this academy. But Gray immediately shut that down. Don't even blame yourself. Without you, I wouldn't have even gotten past the front gate. Besides, Bella and the squad are going to prove that the God's Eye project is the real deal. Professor, your eye for talent has always been on another level. Gray's mind flashed back to the faces from his previous life. Every single one of them had been a key player in the war against the Purger. Ariel paused when she heard his words, then a faint smile broke through as she nodded. Thanks for having my back. But Ariel wasn't about to let Gray act like this was just about everyone else. Out of the entire God's Eye crew, Gray was the one she had the most faith in. Ariel knew Eli Akub, and the other special admits were all destined to become absolute legends. But the first time she truly believed someone could transcend the limits of humanity itself was the moment she met Gray. He was floored that Ariel held him in such high regard, putting him in the same league as those future powerhouses. Still, Gray immediately stamped out the hesitation rising in his mind. That was a weakness. The mastermind pulling Varian strings probably hadn't given up on summoning the Purger, which meant Gray couldn't afford to relax for a second. That thing was an entity capable of wiping out every elite fighter in a single devastating blow, and the whole reason Gray had returned to this timeline was to guarantee the Purger could be defeated and to seize control of the world with his own two hands. 3 days went by in a flash. Today's class was a live swordsmanship combat drill. The instructor was simply pairing students up by name. Once 2 names were called, they were a team. The second Gray heard it was a practical combat session, he was completely dialed in. He had to take this seriously. If Gray screwed this up, everyone would start trashing the God's Eye program all over again. At the bare minimum, he had to prove he could hang with the regular students. And right on cue, a familiar headache popped up again, his little rival, you could say. On the board, the instructor wrote 2 names, Gray and Leonhardt. Leonhardt was the ace of the entire program, the strongest fighter in the first year. The instructor said slowly, I do my best to match students with comparable skill levels. Don't hold anything back. Treat this like it's the real thing. Gray mentally cursed the instructor out 1,000 times. Comparable skill levels. He was a special admission case who barely made it in. How was he supposed to go up against the ace? Plus, Leonhardt was already salty toward the God's Eye students after what happened the other day. He was probably just itching for an excuse to beat Gray into the pavement. Just then, Leonhardt stepped up behind Gray. He watched him like a hawk, waiting to see what kind of cheap shot he was about to pull. But what totally shocked Gray was that Leonhardt actually came over to say, Hi, yo, what's up? Gray's entire expression shifted. He couldn't get a read on what this guy was planning. Leonhardt, on the other hand, looked genuinely stoked. Looks like we're partners. No cap, I'm seriously hyped for this. But in his head, Leonhardt was on a completely different vibe. Grinding to become number 1 was totally worth it if it meant he could finally cross swords with Gray. He'd trained harder than anyone. Now he was going to make Gray witness the power of his true swordsmanship. Those words just made Gray feel super awkward, just as he thought. Leonhardt was 100% here for some payback. It was impossible not to be suspicious. Leonhardt's smile was way too calculated. He was clearly thrilled that he finally had a legitimate chance to throw hands with Gray. On the instructor's command, the class formed 2 lines and took their positions in the center. The duel was on. Everyone was fighting to take down their opponent. This was the perfect opportunity to flex, and nobody was about to waste it. In that same instant, Leonhardt moved like a bolt of lightning, grinning as he called out, Gray, you better watch yourself. My attack is coming. With a deafening clang, Gray's blade slammed into Leonhardt's sword head-on. A jolt of shock shot through Gray. No wonder this guy was the top swordsman of the year. His form wasn't perfect, but it was terrifyingly close to it. In the very next moment, Leonhardt unleashed a strike that sent Gray flying backward. His body flowed with the blade moving, as if the sword itself was leading the dance. At this moment, he was almost completely in sync with his weapon, entering a state of true sword-body unity. Every single strike was razor-sharp. Leonhardt's voice was filled with excitement. Lord Gray, you're on another level. I honestly can't believe you didn't get in through the regular admissions. The comment seriously ticked Gray off. If Leonhardt had enough time for small talk, he should be focusing on the fight. Their blades clashed dozens of times in a split second, sending a shower of sparks into the air. The speed of both fighters was absolutely blinding. But Gray was completely on the back foot. No matter how much he cranked his speed, he just couldn't shake Leonhardt, who stuck to him like a vengeful shadow. Then again, this was kind of what he expected. He honestly thought he'd get folded in the first few seconds, yet here he was, somehow still standing. But even with a two-handed grip, the raw power gap was a joke. Leonhardt's skill with a sword was just completely busted. His style was flawless, a by-the-book technique that had been polished into something absolutely lethal. Even with his past life memories and the Sword Saint's OP training, a sliver of doubt crept in. He wasn't sure he could actually beat this guy. In a blur, Leonhardt was suddenly in his face. Gray threw his sword up to parry, and the impact that followed felt less like steel and more like getting hit by a freight train. He could feel his own stamina tanking fast. Leonhardt just let out a booming laugh. I can do this all day. If it weren't for the Sword Saint's hellish training, Gray knew he would have been flat on his back ages ago. The scariest part though, Leonhardt wasn't even breaking a sweat. Even though the fight barely made him break a sweat, Gray could feel his energy reserves plummeting fast. He was so over this. The professor's words suddenly sliced through his thoughts. Treat this duel like a real battle. As that phrase echoed in his mind, a plan began to form just as Leonhardt's sword came screaming down at him again. In that split second, Gray dropped low, his wrist snapping in a sharp, unexpected motion. Leonhardt's eyes blew wide with shock. He absolutely did not see that coming. A dull thud echoed as Gray's foot slammed into Leonhardt's ankle. Before Leonhardt could even process it, his entire body was launched into the air. With his balance completely shattered, Gray exploded into a counterattack. It finally clicked for Leonhardt. This wasn't a friendly spar anymore. This was a legit fight to the death. Even so, losing was not an option. In the space of a single heartbeat, Gray's blade was kissing Leonhardt's throat while Leonhardt's own sword rested, with equal precision against Gray's neck. The space between them was non-existent. One more inch and they'd both be dead. Gray extended a hand to help Leonhardt up, ready to chalk it up to a draw, but you could tell from Leonhardt's face that he wasn't buying it. In that final clash, all Leonhardt did was swing his sword wildly. Gray, on the other hand, he was different. If he'd truly wanted to, he could have skewered Leonhardt's heart. Leonhardt's voice was eerily calm. This was just a simulation. That's why you slammed the brakes on your blade at my neck, right? Gray just chuckled. Even with all these protective runes, aiming a sword at someone's chest in a practice match feels kinda extra. That's when it seemed to sink in for Leonhardt. That means I lost, Lord Gray. You're an absolute monster. With a smile, Leonhardt turned and started walking. Because of you, I finally get the difference between a real fight and some fancy fencing, and that a battle is about more than just sword skills. Gray tried to tell him not to take it so hard. From a technical standpoint, what he did was basically cheating. But Leonhardt wasn't listening. The instructor told us to treat training like it was real, and in a real fight, there's no such thing as cheating. As he said it, his pace slowed to a halt. Lord Gray, how about we run it back? A faint blush crept onto his face as he asked. Gray was completely speechless. They had just finished. His stamina bar was still in the red. He knew damn well he'd only won by catching Leonhardt completely off guard. In a straight-up fight, he wouldn't stand a chance. It wasn't about technique at this point. Leonhardt's endurance stats were just on another level. Right then, some guy suddenly stormed forward, shouting for them to stop. He declared that whether it was combat practice or not, this was still a swordsmanship class, and no one was allowed to use moves outside of pure swordplay. And someone like you, a trash-tier special admit, has no business sparring with the top students. Don't get all high and mighty just because you know a few magic tricks. Got it. Gray couldn't believe all the blame was being dumped on him, especially since he didn't even set up the match. Luckily, Leonhardt stepped in to shut him down. The professor decided it. Gray is the only one qualified to fight me. So, mind your own damn business. The argument drew the instructor over, who confirmed it on the spot. The matchup was his call, and he had promised to pair up students with similar power levels. He made it crystal clear that Gray was the only student capable of going toe-to-toe with Leonhardt. Leonhardt nodded, looking smug. The instructor's judgment was flawless. Seeing the other students still looked salty, the instructor added, if you're that bent out of shape about it, then you step up, beat Gray, and you can take on Leonhardt. The student's face lit up with pure excitement. This was exactly the outcome he'd been hoping for. He started flexing that he got into the academy by defeating an examiner, and that he shouldn't be lumped in with the scrubs who barely scraped by, or the complete failures. Little did he know Leonhardt was sneering on the inside, judging Lord Gray by his admission status without knowing his true power. It was like looking at a mirror of his own past self, and people like that usually live to regret it. Leon saw this as the perfect stage. Through this fight, everyone would finally have to acknowledge Gray's real strength. Leon shot a look at the challenger that could curdle milk. He was practically vibrating with rage, wanting to tear the guy limb from limb. He finally got a one-on-one with Lord Gray, only for this clown to interrupt them. A sudden chill shot down the student's spine as he looked up and met Leon's furious gaze. Leon's thoughts were ice cold. Just for getting in the way of our spar, you deserve to die. Now, the student was totally confused. He had no clue why Leon was so pissed at him. Wasn't Leon the one who was always against the special admission kids? The instructor turned to Gray and asked if he was down to accept the challenge. Gray had no read on how strong this opponent really was. But if the guy got in through the standard exams, this was not going to be an easy fight. At a bare minimum, his opponent's stamina and physical power were definitely on another level. Even the Sword Saint's hellish training couldn't completely close the gap, created by years of proper nutrition and physical conditioning. Gray wasn't feeling too confident in his technique alone, but getting expelled for losing, he seriously doubted it. The instructor just nodded. Don't worry, you won't be kicked out if you lose. This is just a sparring class. But that doesn't mean you should take it easy. Gray accepted. He raised his blade, sinking into a fighting posture as the duel began. His opponent exploded forward with incredible speed, shouting with pure arrogance, "It's time, you special admit trash. Learned your proper place." In the next instant, steel crashed against steel. But the impact, it threw Gray for a loop. There was almost no force behind the blow. With just a slight push, he sent the other student flying backward. The kid froze midair, his face a mask of pure shock, completely unprepared to be so easily dominated. Gray's expression remained grim. This guy's power was nothing special. He had to be hiding his true strength. No one acts that cocky without a serious trump card. But then, Gray's own casual follow-up actually managed to draw blood. The student was blasted backward yet again. Gray quickly closed the distance. "Hey, you alright? I was aiming for your sword, but I figured you'd at least dodge it." A moment later, the student staggered back onto his feet, scooping up his sword with tears in his eyes. He screamed for a rematch, yelling that Gray had just caught him off guard. Even the instructor looked completely fed up. Fine. If you're that determined to get beaten up, then go until you're satisfied. I'm not stepping in again. The second round kicked off, and the student charged once more. 60 seconds later, Gray just gave him an awkward look and asked if he was still good to go. By that point, the student's head was covered in massive, swollen lumps. The professors watching from the side couldn't bear it. One of them immediately yelled for someone to haul the kid to the infirmary. After he was dragged off, the instructor announced, "This year's freshman representatives will be Gray and Leon. Does anyone have a problem with that?" Gray was completely lost. He had no idea what being a representative even meant. The instructor explained that in a couple of days, the top first years were slated to challenge the second-year champion. It was supposed to be a friendly exhibition match, with both sides holding back. He then added that the freshmen had lost for 35 consecutive years without a single victory. But this year, he said, could be the one. With you and Leon both sword prodigies, we might finally break that losing streak. The instructor's words hit him like a truck. A 35-year losing streak was the power difference between first and second years. Really that massive? The teacher nodded. At this academy, a single year of experience created an insane gap. Losing was the standard outcome. If a first year could even put up a respectable fight, it was considered legendary. A victory, on the other hand, that would be a literal miracle recorded in the academy's history books. Just being selected to participate was a huge honor. With that, the teacher departed, telling them not to get nervous and to just have fun. Gray stroked his chin in thought. The teacher seemed way too calm. Maybe these inter-year battles weren't as intense as he was picturing. But as a God's Eye special case, this was the perfect opportunity to prove he actually had what it takes to fight. Grinding was no longer an option. It was a necessity. In another part of the school, the academy's faculty gathered for their final meeting, all focused on a motion submitted by Budra, his proposal to expel Amy White a God's Eye special admission. This move came directly from the head of the magic department himself. Ariel immediately shot it down. She demanded to know why this was even being discussed, reminding them that all God's Eye students were under her direct supervision. Budra shot back that her supervision was precisely the issue. Amy White failed his third-year promotion exam, but he's still here solely because of his special status. Every other student who failed was expelled. That is the definition of unfair. Ariel wasn't about to get into it with him. She simply repeated the facts as she knew them. Amy is on the cusp of developing world-class combat abilities. The only thing holding him back is a temporary backlash from his power. If not for that, he would have passed a long time ago. She stated firmly, "My students are my responsibility to manage, not a topic for a committee vote." Another professor just sneered. He dismissed her talk of backlashes and hidden potential as pathetic excuses for a useless kid. How much longer are you going to spin that fantasy? Ariel instantly knew this was an ambush. They had planned this. Amy's power was absolutely real, but so was the backlash. He could master that power at any moment tomorrow or the day after. But if they forced his hand now, that potential could be shattered forever. The professors looked totally unconvinced. They had heard these same lines before. Was her strategy just to let an unqualified student linger in the academy forever? They couldn't understand that Ariel was doing this for the good of the entire institution. Her goal was to cultivate true geniuses, not to throw them away because they didn't conform to a rigid, outdated system. A large professor mocked her, saying that while past special admits may have been impressive, this current generation was a total bust. An older professor chuckled, listing off Jacob Field and Amy White, and Bella as all being painfully average. Perhaps the legendary God's Eye has lost its touch. It might be time to shut down the entire program. A single bead of sweat traced a path down Ariel's temple. Abolish it. The word was poison, an unthinkable end. The Founders Council established this program, one voice sneered, and a majority vote can just as easily tear it down. Have you forgotten that, Ariel? Another challenged. A third voice cut in, brutally blunt. Your current God's Eye students are frankly pathetic. Sure, Bella might be getting a little better, but the improvement was barely a blip on the radar, especially when her mana capacity was still so questionable. Ariel tried to fire back to defend them, but her voice was swallowed by the coordinated assault. The professors were a unified front, relentlessly tearing her students apart. And in that instant, Ariel saw the truth. This was a setup, a calculated move to completely dismantle the God's Eye system. The chilling realization dawned on her in this room. Her authority had evaporated into nothing. Most of these professors were bottom-line thinkers. If a project didn't directly benefit the academy, it was dead weight. If Ariel wanted any chance of swaying them, she couldn't say a single word that would push them further away. Buddha watched her, a man already savoring his victory. "What's wrong?" he mocked, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. "Cat got your tongue. You should at least have the decency to admit you're past your prime." His cronies chimed in, piling on. "You were a legend once, Ariel, but maybe it's time to retire before you completely destroy your own reputation." But Ariel stood her ground, an unmovable pillar. She knew she could spot raw talent. These students just needed a chance to ignite. And with enough time, they would set the world on fire. All she had to do was stop the academy from expelling them before they got that chance. As long as her students were in the game, she was willing to bet everything she had. Just then, a professor spoke, his voice cutting through the tension. He brought up a student named Gray, a kid with supposedly insane swordsmanship skills. If that's the case, he proposed, why not throw him into an intergrade battle? A sinister grin spread across Buddha's face. The trap was sprung. Then there's nothing left to talk about. The gauntlet was thrown down. Gray had a fight. If this kid could prove himself with a blade, the outcome would seal the fate of the entire God's Eye program. Hearing this, Ariel's gaze shot instinctively to the Sword Saint, seated beside her. The Sword Saint gave a subtle, almost imperceptible shake of her head, a clear warning, Gray must not fight. Ariel immediately shot the idea down. Gray's power isn't suited for a performance, she declared. In a real battle, a life or death struggle, that would be a different story. Crack. A professor slammed his fist onto the table, his eyes burning with rage as he glared at Ariel. Excuses, always excuses, he roared. If that's all you have, then let's abolish the God's Eye program right now. The blood drained from Ariel's face. She was rattled. You don't understand, she pleaded. His abilities are on another level entirely. A suffocating silence blanketed the conference room. Finally, the headmaster brought the meeting to a close, delivering the verdict. The God's Eye students would participate in the grade battle. Their performance would determine everything that came next. Ariel's heart sank into a pit of despair. It was the one outcome she had dreaded most. Buddha looked like he'd just won the championship, his voice dripping with false excitement. Well now, I'm really looking forward to the match. And with that, the execution was finalized. As the Sword Saint left, she gave Ariel a long, heavy stare, her eyes screaming with concern. Ariel remained in her chair alone, a statue carved from defeat. She knew better than anyone that a mock battle was the worst stage for Gray's true power, but his reputation in the academy was absolute zero. But with her back against the wall and no other cards to play, she could only pray that Gray could pull off a miracle. Ariel felt like she was about to shatter into a million pieces. If Gray failed to deliver the God's Eye, program would be history, and every single one of her students would be thrown out onto the street. Her last hope was Gray. The day of the intergrade battle finally dawned. The entire student body was packed into the arena, ready for the epic clash between the first years and the second years. The first fighter entered the stage. It was the first year's top-ranked swordsman, the one and only Leon Hart. His opponent, the second year's Ace Harmach. Then the next first-year challenger was announced, Gray, and the opponent he was slated to face was Diaper. The moment their eyes met, a jolt of recognition shot through Gray. No freaking way. This was the same dude who ambushed him in the hallway. Was this for real? He was actually supposed to fight him in public. Up in the stands, entire rows of professors were now seated, their gazes locked on the arena. Buddha was staring down at Gray with pure, unadulterated disdain, practically drooling at the chance to see this so-called special admit get utterly demolished. Leon turned to his opponent. Yo, do this. Many professors always show up for these matches. Harmach shook his head. Nah, man. This is a first. Last year, like 3 fencing instructors even bothered coming. Harmach was totally baffled by the massive audience. Suddenly, the gears started turning in Leon's sharp mind. A confident smirk lit up his face. Oh, I get it, he declared. They're all here to see Gray. They've got some impeccable taste, I'll give them that. The more he thought about it, the more hyped he became. Harmach, meanwhile, just stared at him, completely floored. Was the #1 rookie? Seriously fanboying over that special admit kid from the stands, and then confirming Leon's wild theory. Buddha's voice boomed from above, affirming his guess. They'd all come to watch the last stand of a God's Eye special admit. Final. The word didn't even register in Gray's mind. Catching his confusion, Buddha shot a look at Ariel, asking if she'd kept the kid in the dark. Then, with a cruel smirk, he dropped the bomb. The academy was axing the entire God's Eye program. Gray's world just shattered. His head whipped toward Ariel, his eyes begging her to deny it. Ariel's gaze fell to the floor. Her silence was louder than any confession. She had hidden this from him, terrified. Because if Gray knew what was truly on the line, he would absolutely unleash that power. And in his current condition, that was a straight-up death wish. Forcing a weak smile, she desperately tried to pull him back from the edge, insisting Buddha was just trying to get in his head. He had to block it out and lock in on the fight. But Gray saw it, the faint, uncontrollable tremor in her hands. He shut his eyes, breathing in, and his voice came out impossibly steady. Buddha just scoffed from the sidelines, telling them to go on to make a complete joke of themselves. He was banking on it. One humiliating beatdown for Gray, and the rest of the faculty would finally see that Ariel and her precious God's Eye were completely washed up. That's when Gray finished his sentence. Now that the professor had made it personal, he couldn't just let it slide. For the first time, a flicker of shock crossed Budra's face. Gray laid it out plain and simple. He didn't give a damn if he got humiliated himself. But he would be damned if he let anyone drag Professor Ariel's reputation through the mud. Ariel's own eyes went wide with disbelief. She never dreamed he'd defend her so openly. Budra just jabbed a finger at Gray, sneering that he couldn't see a shred of the potential Ariel was so hyped about. Unlike her, the rest of the professors, the ones who weren't losing their minds, were all betting on Gray getting absolutely wrecked. But instead of rage, a thrill shot through Gray. If that's what they thought, then he was about to make every single one of them eat their words. Budra was so livid he looked ready to jump into the arena himself, but the other professors had to physically hold him back. Ariel dropped her head, a cold dread creeping into her gut. Just then, the ref's voice boomed, ordering the fighters to group up with their teams. The anxiety was crushing Ariel. If Gray was up against any other top-tier student, maybe, just maybe, she could breathe. His raw, street-level sword skills might have carved out a sliver of a chance. But the guy he was slated to fight, that's what sent ice through her veins. Diver's brain had been surgically altered, jacking his reaction time into a realm that wasn't even human. The dude was a literal living weapon. For a fighter like Gray who lives and dies by ambushes, Diver was his absolute worst-case scenario. And it all came back to that lunatic. She prayed, begged silently that Gray wouldn't tap into that power. Losing was better than the alternative. He just couldn't use it. Trying to calm his nerves, Ariel's voice softened. She told him to just fight his best and forget about her. Above all else, don't push himself over the limit. A small chuckle escaped Gray's lips as he promised he understood. She had nothing to worry about. Moments later, the Clash of the Titans officially kicked off. As the two champions stepped into the ring, the referee announced the arena was flooded with protective magic. The system would detect any fatal blow, instantly activate, and declare a winner. The instructions were simple: fight like you mean to kill. Both combatants were radiating confidence, each dead set on taking the other out. You could feel the hype building. This battle between the Academy's elite was drawing every eye. The second the match started, Leonhardt exploded forward, closing the gap in a flash. Harmank met him with a ferocious grin. Not bad, that burst speed is legit. Now show me what else you can do. Two piercing shrieks of steel sliced the air as their forms became blurs, their blades clashing in a non-stop high-speed rally. By the time their movements were clear again, the fight had already escalated into a brutal exchange. Then Harmank planted his foot and surged forward, his entire aura shifting. Pure killing intent radiated from him as his blade sliced straight for Leonhardt's vitals. Leonhardt dove low to dodge, dropping into a familiar move. He planted a hand on the ground for support and unleashed a powerful kick without a moment's hesitation. But the execution was clunky, not nearly as smooth as it should have been. It gave Harmank just enough time to slip away. Leonhardt let out a frustrated sigh. Man, he just couldn't replicate Gray's style. Harmank, on the other hand, was seriously impressed, even complimenting him mid-fight, admitting Leonhardt was way stronger than he'd been in his first year. Getting amped up, Harmank challenged him to kick it into high gear, wanting to see if Leonhardt could hang. Leonhardt's reflexes were on point, but he was getting completely overwhelmed. Before he knew it, he was pinned against the barrier. Harmank saw his opening, and his sword flashed, aiming right for the throat. The protective magic flared to life in an instant. It was over. Leonhardt had lost. The two warriors sheathed their blades. Time for round two. As Leonhardt walked past, he gave Gray a nod. Good luck. Gray offered a silent thanks. He'd talked a big game, and now it was time to put up or shut up. Back before this whole timeline reset, Gray had slaughtered endless legions of despair beasts. Compared to that nightmare, his chances here weren't zero. He heard the scrape of a sword on stone as someone stalked toward him. A cold voice muttered that Professor Budra could go wait in hell. He was about to send Gray to a world of pain. It was crystal clear this grim-faced opponent wasn't just sparring. He was here for a legit life-or-death showdown. The bell screamed, and the intergrade duel between Gray and the second-year diver officially kicked off. Without a shred of hesitation, Gray exploded forward. But in a jaw-dropping twist, his lightning-fast assault was intercepted head-on. Diver countered with sickening ease, sending Gray hurtling through the air. The raw power behind that single blow was staggering. Gray's arm was still screaming in protest, trembling from the sheer impact. Ariel had given him a heads up about Diver's ridiculous reaction time, but Gray never anticipated this kind of monstrous strength. The power gap between them was an absolute chasm. No clever tricks were going to close this void. He had one final ace up his sleeve, but using it would absolutely wreck him. Ariel had made him swear never to unleash that power. If he did, he wasn't just risking injury, he was staring death in the face. It was a promise he made to her. Ariel knew what was on the line, but she would never want Gray to roll the dice with his own life. Even worse, that kind of power might just shatter the arena's protective barrier. It had the potential to straight up murder his opponent. Trapped between the hunger for victory and the need for control, Gray froze. In that split second of doubt, Diver closed the distance with terrifying velocity. Gray had no time to think, only to react. He threw his sword up, barely deflecting another crushing blow. With a vicious flick of his wrist, Diver transitioned into another flawless attack. The techniques were basic textbook stuff, but backed by Diver's insane physique and reflexes, they should have been more than enough to crush Gray. It wasn't that Diver lacked the skills to finish this. He was intentionally pulling his punches, and then a twisted, sinister smile spread across Diver's face. An icy dread shot down Gray's spine. Diver's next attack obliterated his guard. The follow-up was a killing blow aimed directly for Gray's eyes. There was no way to dodge, no way to escape, and yet somehow Gray blocked it, leaving himself completely stunned. Why did Diver slow down right at the critical moment? Gray shoved Diver back, his mind racing. He shouldn't have been able to block that. There was no way. The terrifying thought began to sink in. Diver could have ended this fight ages ago. He just chose not to. Up in the stands, Ariel knew instantly that something was horribly wrong. Diver's stats, his raw power levels were off the charts. Without a second thought, she activated her God's Eye. Through her vision, she saw a chaotic mass of violet flames raging inside Diver's heart, a power so alien that even she couldn't identify its source. But one thing was terrifyingly certain. That violet inferno was beyond dangerous. A few professors nearby just scoffed. The match was already a blowout. Was her prize student really so stubborn he wouldn't surrender? They started dissing the second-year students, commenting on their nasty attitudes. They could obviously end the fight whenever they wanted, but were choosing to drag it out and toy with him. It was a sick kind of entertainment. The God's Eye student was barely hanging on, just deflecting blows, and yet he still refused to tap out. Didn't that just prove how weak he really was? Professor Boudreaux watched the whole thing with a smug grin. He even theorized that maybe Gray knew the God's Eye program was about to get axed, and was intentionally stalling, trying to send a message that if they kept this up, the entire special mission system was going to collapse into chaos. Another professor chimed in sarcastically, praising Gray for being such a thoughtful student, someone who really cared about the Academy's future. That's when Ariel snapped, cutting them both off. She roared for the match to be stopped immediately. This was too dangerous. Boudreaux just gave her a confused look, asking what danger she was talking about. In a simulation battle, seriously. Another professor, thinking Ariel was just ignorant, calmly explained that the arena was layered in powerful defensive magic. Any attack with lethal force would be neutralized automatically. This protection manifested as a nearly invisible, blue energy field, which was the entire reason students could go all out without fear, unless there was some other problem. Stop the fight. Now, Ariel demanded. She knew all about the barriers, but what was coming was something they could never hope to contain. The second her words left her lips, an unholy surge of energy erupted from Diver. A black toxic aura began to pour out of him, a creeping darkness that snaked its way towards the stands. A bone-deep chill gripped Ariel as her worst fears began to materialize. Something was fundamentally wrong with that kid. Diver wasn't just fighting to win anymore. He was fighting to kill. Diver settled into a ready stance, that dark energy coiling around his sword like a living thing. With a sound like tearing reality, he swung his blade without an ounce of restraint. A wave of pure, destructive energy shot forward. Gray's heart stopped dead in his chest. This power, it was on a completely different level than anything he could possibly dealt face head-on. The swordlight rocketed into the sky, as a deafening explosion shook the entire stadium to its foundations. A moment later, Gray choked back a gasp of air. The raw, untamed force was unbelievable. A massive scar had been carved straight down the middle of the arena. If he had been a fraction of a second slower, he would have been sliced in two. But what truly horrified him was that the defensive field itself had been ripped open. His magical protection was absolutely useless. By some miracle, Diver hadn't shattered the final outermost barrier, or even Professor Boudreaux might have been vaporized. Seizing the chance, Ariel moved to forcibly end the match. She had told them the barrier couldn't handle Diver's power. She raised her hand, magic crackling at her fingertips, pure fury blazing in her eyes. That damn Bradley. What in the hell had he implanted inside a student? Ariel began to tear down the defensive formation herself, preparing to jump into the arena and restrain Diver by force. But her power was nothing against the barrier. She couldn't even begin to weave a binding spell. With no other option, she screamed to the officials behind her, declaring a state of emergency. They had to drop the barrier and stop the match, now, or people were going to die. But the professors were completely frozen, paralyzed by sheer terror. It was a grim sneak peek of why they'd be the first to bolt. When a real catastrophe finally hit humanity, Ariel's gaze snapped back to the battlefield. Shutting down the fight from the outside would take an eternity, and she had no idea if Gray could even hold out that long. She desperately signaled for him to fall back to buy some time. Gray wanted to bolt, if only he actually could. In a flash, Diver was on him again, sticking to him like a vengeful shadow. Turning his back for even a split second would be a death sentence. The raw power of that attack sent a shockwave of fear through the student audience. The Sword Saint watched his face, an unreadable mask. He calculated that the professor's spells would need at least 30 seconds to even reach the arena. In a battle, this intense 30 seconds was an eternity. They were out of options. It might be a bit premature, but the Sword Saint was betting that Gray would somehow clutch this. Back in the fray, Gray was constantly repositioning, narrowly dancing around Diver's relentless assault. The The Sword Saint shot to his feet, his voice booming across the stadium, telling Gray to envision his entire body as a blade. Stop swinging your sword, and channel that energy into your own movement instead. Gray heard him loud and clear. The only problem, Diver wasn't giving him an inch of breathing room. Still, Gray had absolute faith in the Sword Saint's guidance. He instantly blasted backward, creating a sliver of distance between himself and Diver. Alright, let's see if this actually works, Gray thought, steeling himself. He was a single sharpened edge, focusing every last drop of his power into one infinitesimal point. The attacks coming at him didn't matter anymore. He drilled the concept deeper into his mind. I am the sword. As Diver's strike closed in for the kill, Gray remained perfectly still. With an ear-splitting crack, Diver's attack slammed uselessly into the defensive barrier once again. In that exact same moment, a look of pure disbelief washed over Diver's face, because somehow, Gray was now standing behind him, his body radiating a terrifying, supercharged aura. Diver was completely rattled. How in the hell did Gray's speed just skyrocket like that in a single instant? A heartbeat later, Gray unleashed his counter without a shred of hesitation. Just as he predicted, a protective spell flared to life around Diver's body. But as Gray poured more raw power into his blade, Diver's magical protection began to spiderweb with cracks before shattering completely. Then, Diver was sent flying. The blow had missed his vital spots, but that was irrelevant. His protection was broken. The match was over. Gray had won. The impact gouged a massive crater in the arena floor. Budra just stood there, frozen, solid with dread. He never ever imagined Gray's power could actually shatter the arena's defensive barrier. What kind of freakish battle was this? The Sword Saint quickly called out to the ref, telling him to check on the other student. That strike shouldn't have been lethal. The referee scrambled to call for the medical team. But in the next instant, a massive, grotesque hand clawed its way out of the crater, wreathed in a sinister black energy. The Sword Saint's expression hardened. Yeah, he muttered, something is seriously wrong with this kid. Vile black energy erupted violently from Diver's body as his hair stood on end. He threw his head back and let out a guttural roar that pierced the sky, a dead giveaway that his sanity had completely snapped. Ariel screamed a warning to Gray that it wasn't over, that he needed to stay on his guard. But a primal fear was already crawling down Gray's spine. Every single one of his instincts was screaming the same message. Run. Waves of dark power surged toward him. They weren't just intimidating. They packed real destructive force, shoving Gray back again and again, as he struggled to maintain distance. From Gray's point of view, the dark tendrils still weren't quite fast enough to land a solid hit, and yet the entire arena platform was being systematically torn to shreds by the chaotic energy. Professor Boudreaux was still frozen in shock, as pandemonium exploded behind him, with students and staff scrambling for their lives. Just then, a team of mages from the Magic Division finally arrived and began to dismantle the barrier, but the process would take at least 10 seconds. On a battlefield like this, 10 seconds felt like a lifetime, more than enough time to decide who lives and who dies. Gray now had only one objective: survive for 10 seconds until help arrived. But staring down a completely unhinged opponent that was starting to feel like a fantasy, Diver was 100% trying to kill him. His form flickered, and in the blink of an eye he was right in Gray's face. It happened so fast it barely even registered. Gray just barely managed to throw his sword up to block the devastating blow. The sheer, unadulterated power and speed sent a shiver through his bones. This wasn't something a normal human body was capable of. Diver was something else entirely. And in that chilling moment, Gray had a bitter realization he wasn't exactly normal anymore either. In the next instant, their movements became a perfect, deadly mirror, as both fighters vanished from their spots. When Gray reappeared, he was already behind Diver, his next attack fully charged and ready to launch. That same cold-killing intent was now burning in Gray's eyes. If his opponent was playing for keeps, then the gloves were officially off. It didn't matter how fast Diver's reflexes were. From Gray's perspective, he was moving in slow motion. Then, without any warning, Gray suddenly coughed up a spray of blood. That unknown power raging inside him was clearly pushing his body far beyond its absolute limits. Beyond the arena's edge, Ariel was losing her mind, screaming for Gray to fall back and end the fight. What she didn't realize was that retreat was a death sentence. Diver's power had blown past everyone's wildest guesses. Gray had only one play left: attack. In that split second, Gray funneled every last shred of his mysterious power into his blade. If this was a duel to the death, he was damn well going to finish it. But it still wasn't enough. He needed more juice. After a tense moment, Gray felt the energy max out. This was his shot. The hunt was on. With a gruesome tearing sound, a pair of severed arms flew through the air. Diver's body was blasted backward, his limbs completely sheared off. Gray had deliberately avoided a kill shot. He needed answers. What kind of messed up surgery could create a monster like this? The light in Diver's eyes vanished. After one last scream, he passed out. Gray let him live, but that was the only mercy he showed. Diver's body collapsed to its knees with a heavy thud, black energy still pouring from the stumps of his arms. Ariel was frozen solid, totally stunned, and so were the two magic professors standing behind her. Gray had actually beaten him. By the time the clash was over, the entire dueling platform was a crater of rubble. At that exact moment, the barrier finally vanished. A whole squad of instructors led by Ariel stormed onto the platform. Without a single word, Ariel instantly slapped magical restraints on the student. Completely ignoring how wrecked his own body was, Gray shakily hauled himself to his feet, believing the fight was finally done. But the very next instant, a sickening wave of agony ripped through his system. Blood exploded from everywhere at once. Every wound he'd suffered, all the damage he'd been suppressing, finally blew wide open. The sight almost gave Ariel a heart attack. "You are not dying on me, Gray." She channeled every last drop of her magic into a healing spell, flooding it into his wounds. Right then, 3 professors rushed up from behind. Seeing them, Ariel desperately urged them to help to pour their own healing magic into Gray. Soon, a warm current washed over his entire body. His eyes slowly fluttered open. A faint smirk touched the corner of his mouth. The God's Eye special admission slot was officially his. The moment Gray came to Ariel, let out a massive sigh of relief she didn't even realize she was holding in. But a second later, she froze. She was not prepared for Gray to immediately get to his feet. The 2 professors just stared at him, dumbfounded. "Are you seriously okay?" He got up way too fast. Gray just turned to Ariel and told her to check him out with her God's Eye. Ariel slowly took off her glasses, as a blue light ignited in her left pupil. But as she scanned Gray's condition, her expression twisted into pure shock. She could not process what she was seeing. After unleashing that insane amount of power, his soul was completely untouched. As for his physical body, the healing magic had already put him back together completely. He shouldn't be feeling any pain at all. From the side, the Sword Saint chuckled. "Looks like the plan worked. We successfully dialed back the backlash." Everything had played out exactly how Gray had planned. But Ariel just snapped. "You call this dialing it back when you cut the buffer." Confused by her hostile tone, the Sword Saint glanced over, sensing something was way off. And there she was, practically vibrating with rage. Without his defensive magic, he would have been dead meat. The Sword Saint held up a hand trying to calm her down. "We managed to keep his injuries within a range that healing magic could handle. Considering everything, this is a pretty good outcome." Deep down, the Sword Saint hoped Gray would one day be strong enough to take the full recoil, but that was still a long way off. It was only then that it finally clicked for Gray. All that insane training he went through had been for this one moment. A lot of things went off script, but the end result was still a win. Ariel then shot a look over at Diver, now reduced to a human torso by Gray's attack. She said coldly, "That guy's intent to kill was off the charts." She then turned to the professors beside her. "Go ahead and make the result of this match official." Her voice was calm but carried absolute authority. "If you're not blind, you saw that Diver's defensive magic was force-triggered by my attack. Therefore, the winner is the first-year student Gray." The entire stadium went absolutely nuts. A freshman beating a second-year prodigy was literally unheard of. The cheers were deafening. Lord Gray is a freaking legend. So, the rumors are true. The God's Eye special admits are all monsters. This one match also shattered the freshman's 35-fight losing streak. To be honest, the Sword Saint couldn't care less about that stupid record anymore. After seeing a duel like that, who in their right mind could say that Ariel's judgment guided by the God's Eye was wrong? The dean let out a soft chuckle as he watched the scene unfold. "We have no choice but to acknowledge him. As of today, no one will support getting rid of the God's Eye special admission slot." He added, "Actually, we should be ashamed we ever thought about it. We almost threw away a student with that kind of unbelievable talent." Ariel didn't join the professor's chat, instead just standing quietly to the side. Her body was trembling with pure excitement. "Gray really blew me away today." Model. A slow smile bloomed across her face as her eyes welled up with emotion, just as a bald professor's voice boomed with raw honesty. "The ones who should be reflecting on their actions are those pushing to dismantle the God's Eye program." The moment he spoke, every single head in the room snapped toward Boudra and his crew. Icy sweat began to bead on their foreheads, their mouths hanging open, utterly silenced. A heartbeat later, they were scrambling, stammering out pathetic excuses before making a humiliating exit. As they scurried away, a wave of laughter rippled through the onlookers. Someone murmured, "Never go against a god. Guess some sayings are timeless for a reason." Still, things are way chiller now than they used to be. The world's definitely changed. Meanwhile, Ariel was still trying to get a rise out of the Sword Saint, but he was completely stonewalling her, knowing full well it was an argument he couldn't win. She didn't notice, but Gray was watching her from a distance, a question sparking in his mind. Did something happen to the professor in her past? Just then, the dean's voice cut in from right behind Gray. "Now that the distractions are gone, there are a few things I'm concerned about that we need to discuss." Gray's curiosity was piqued. What could the dean possibly want with him? But in the very next second, he caught the look in the dean's eyes and knew instantly. This was about the mysterious power bubbling inside him. Instead of calling it out, Gray just asked what the dean wanted to talk about. The dean's face was grim. During the match, we detected that the second-year student diver was forcibly juiced with some kind of unnatural power. The Academy is launching a full-scale investigation. This was a simulation battle that was supposed to be 100% safe, and yet it nearly cost a student his life. With that, the dean gave Gray a formal apology, admitting the Academy was entirely at fault for not catching the anomaly beforehand. That's precisely why he'd come to apologize in person. A quiet chuckle escaped Gray's lips, relieved the dean wasn't grilling him about the power itself. You don't need to worry, Dean. At the end of the day, no real harm was done. The dean adjusted his spectacles. I appreciate your understanding. Then his voice hardened. That being said, after Diver went completely berserk, did you not also unleash some kind of unknown power? Gray sighed internally. So, this was the Academy's game. The soft approach first, then the hard questions. This was the exact scenario he'd dreaded. He kept his face a perfect mask of calm. Dean, what I used didn't feel like magic, he replied. It was something far stranger. A kind of energy that modern magical theory has no way of explaining. The dean's interest was clearly hooked. He pressed, asking why Gray would ever study such a power. Gray slowly shut his eyes. He had absolutely no idea how to answer that. No explanation could ever make sense of the power he held. Not before his return, and definitely not while the architect of the purger was still lurking in the shadows. So he just said, I don't know. The dean wasn't having it. You don't know. You wielded that power yourself, and you're telling me you're clueless. Gray's voice was steady. That's right, I don't know. He went on, I wasn't even aware a power like that was dormant inside me. It was actually Professor Ariel who first spotted it and told me about it. Ariel's eyes flickered toward Gray, trying to figure out his angle. After all, every single word that just left his mouth was a calculated lie. He'd been using that power freely ever since he took down the Ogre General. Gray shot her a razor-thin glance, and the message was crystal clear. Just play along. To stop the purger, he needed her to be the face of this power. Ariel caught on instantly. So that's his play. Meticulous as always. Honestly, the way he operated, it wasn't like someone living their first life. Could he be some kind of reincarnated hero from a novel? She shoved the ridiculous thought aside. Ariel gracefully strode forward. Well, if he's going to trust me this much, I don't have a choice, do I? Guess I have to step up for him. She then turned to the dean. As you said, Gray's power is beyond magical theory, but with my eyes, I can perceive it perfectly. After observing it, I enlisted the help of Professor Siskel Longfellow, whose own affinity is uniquely compatible, to help him get a handle on it. That collaboration is what made today's level of control possible. I am still researching the proper way to guide this ability. She paused for effect before landing the final blow. So, would you be willing to let me take full responsibility for everything concerning Gray's power? The dean nodded. After witnessing that battle with my own eyes, I can't possibly deny your request. He made his decision right then and there. From this moment forward, all salvation operations, whether they involve Gray or the entire God's Eye Special Admissions Group, will fall under Professor Ariel's direct command. If the Academy can offer any support whatsoever, you need only ask. Hearing this, both Gray and Ariel just froze for a second. The dean had essentially handed Ariel absolute authority. They shared a quick look, and a spark of pure, unadulterated victory flashed between them. The dean wasn't finished. Now let's make our way to the underground special medical ward. To examine Diver, I will require your eyes. Come with me. And with that, Ariel departed with the dean. In what felt like the blink of an eye, 3 hours vanished. The very instant her analysis concluded, Ariel sent a summons for Gray. The analysis was in the power signature pulsing from Diver was a dead ringer for the purgers. The energy he unleashed was a perfect one-to-one match with their lab data. There was zero doubt. He was jacked up on the exact same type of crystal, straight from that research facility. Still, something wasn't sitting right with Gray. Just what in the hell did they do to Diver? Ariel's next words hit him like a truck. The truth was that man had been a corpse for a long, long time. His soul was hollowed out, leaving behind a shell that could only receive and execute commands. The moment that power surged, Diver wasn't in the driver's seat anymore. It was all the crystal. It's entirely possible that, the second that power was shoved into his body, the person known as Diver simply vanished. As for why he came gunning for you, it's because you were a marked man. This was direct retaliation for the death of Professor Bradley. A critical question sparked in Gray's mind. If Diver was only turned into a puppet after Varian's death, that meant a third party had to be pulling the strings. Ariel, sharp as a tack, had already connected the dots. Exactly. There's a much larger conspiracy hiding beneath all this. I'm going to keep chasing these leads, but it's going to take a while. Her gut was screaming that the World Union Academy itself was tangled up in this whole nightmare. This whole thing was way more messed up than it looked on the surface. Gray told her he got it, and to just say the word, if he could do anything to help. Leaning against the window, Ariel soaked in the last warm rays of the setting sun. Thank you, she said softly. Without you, we would have been completely wiped out. She paused. There's one more thing. About your power. It looks like you found a way to use it without shattering your soul. Gray awkwardly scratched the back of his head. Yeah, maybe, but the physical kickback is way worse than before. But what Ariel said next completely threw him for a loop. She told him not to worry, because the Sword Saint had already prepared the next stage of his training regimen. A jolt of pure hype shot through Gray. Was she for real? He owed everything to the Sword Saint. Without that guidance, he never would have understood the real flow of that power. Ariel nodded. Yes, he's going to personally guide you. As long as you train under him, you'll gain a level of control you can't even imagine right now. The very next day, Gray's new hell began with the Sword Saint. This time, he was surrounded by an entire forest of training mannequins. From behind the sword, Saint's voice boomed, training like this is both incredibly dangerous and agonizing. If you want, we can take more time, find safer methods. Are you absolutely sure about this? Several professors watched from a distance, their faces serious. They were taking Gray's potential very seriously now. But Gray nodded, his expression locked in. He knew this was the only way. This kind of insane, high-risk training was the only thing that could truly unlock his power. Seeing his unshakable resolve, the Sword Saint didn't press him further. In that case, begin. Gray's eyes slid shut as he regulated his breathing. He focused on the Sword Saint's words from before, become the sword, a single, lone blade. Remember that feeling. Bit by bit, that mysterious power started to bleed along the edge of his sword, and before he knew it, that energy had flooded every cell in his body. In that instant, Gray's eyes snapped open. With a vicious swoosh, the training started. He swung his blade once, and every single mannequin in front of him exploded into dust. The attack was impossibly fast. With his sword wrapped in that power, even a lazy swing had enough force to completely obliterate his targets. Everywhere he moved, a flash of light was all it took. Dummies in his path crumpled into piles of fragments. His objective for the day was brutally simple: destroy everything in the shortest amount of time possible. The other professors could only gawk, stunned. His speed was beyond belief. The Sword Saint, however, had a much more complicated look on his face. He'd already pinpointed the core of Gray's fatal flaw. Just then, Gray lashed out toward another target. The very next moment, his own body tore itself, open blood erupting from new wounds. Even then, Gray knew he couldn't stop. He couldn't afford to. Clenching his jaw against the searing pain, he swung one more time. After that final strike, his body finally gave out and crashed to the ground. That was the cue for the professors, who rushed in with hands outstretched, unleashing a torrent of healing magic that stitched his body back together. As the green light washed over him, the bloodstains on Gray's skin vanished. Looking like he hadn't just been torn to shreds, he thanked them. The Sword Saint laughed heartily. Not bad. You lasted a bit longer than last time. Repeat this enough, and your body will be forced to adapt to the backlash. Gray flexed his fingers, a realization finally dawning on him that he'd missed in his battle-focused state. Back then, he'd been running on pure berserker adrenaline, which was why he barely registered the pain. But the truth was the exact opposite. Tapping into that power was excruciating. The Sword Saint walked toward him. Pain and torment. That's just proof you're shattering your limits. That said, I'm well aware this kind of training is overkill, but the choice was his and his alone. Gray didn't need words. His actions screamed his answer. Overload or not, he was pushing through. Time was a luxury he just didn't have. He urged the Sword Saint to run the simulation again, dead set on forcing his body to evolve. Just then, the sharp click-clack of heels on stone echoed across the training grounds, shattering the moment. It was Professor Ariel, and the look on her face was pure ice. She laid down the law. This intense regimen was strictly a once-a-day deal for Gray's own good. Pushing it again could inflict permanent damage. Gray shot back that he was fine. The other professors had already patched him up. This kind of training wouldn't hurt a fly. Ariel wasn't buying it. A broken bone can be mended, she argued, but taking another soul-crushing blow before his mind was stable, that was a different kind of danger. That kind of trauma could mess with the very way he wielded his sword. A chilling truth Gray knew all too well from his own past. In fact, that exact mental block was the reason he'd once been unable to access his true power. The Sword Saint finally chimed in, his voice laced with honesty. Honestly, that's a relief. Even I can't repeat this insane training multiple times a day, so you'd better listen to Ariel. With a deafening clang, he dropped the massive set of armor he was holding, the impact shaking the floor and leaving no doubt about its crushing weight. One of the other professors looked on confused. Gray, what's the big rush? Why are you so desperate to get stronger? You're already a monster on the battlefield. Ariel cut in before he could answer. That's my fault. I'm the one who dragged Gray into this whole mess with Professor Bradley. And now the shadowy figures behind it all have painted a target on his back. The diver incident was just the start. Something is moving in the shadows of this academy, and the blood wipers, that criminal syndicate hunting for Bradley's catalyst, could attack at any second. She explained that locking Gray away under heavy guard wouldn't work. His only real path to safety was to become overwhelmingly powerful himself. It was his only shot at survival. Hearing this, Gray placed a hand on his chest, reassuring Ariel not to blame herself. "Taking down Liquid 4 was my call," he said, his voice firm. He knew deep down that if he hadn't stopped it, humanity itself would have been toast. Ariel's expression softened into a satisfied nod. "You truly are an exceptional student. My only job now is to help you unleash every last drop of that power." The Sword Saint suddenly let out a booming laugh. "The way you say that, it sounds like you've already got a master plan cooked up." Ariel's lips curved into a smirk. "Don't tell me you've forgotten the fastest and safest route for a swordsman to level up." At her words, the Sword Saint's eyes drifted to Gray, sizing him up from head to toe. Gray just stood there watching the exchange with a curious gaze. The Sword Saint cracked a wry smile. For a swordsman, the answer is always simple: get a new sword. Instinctively, Gray's eyes fell to the weapon sheathed at his hip, a standard-issue Academy sword, supposedly a top-of-the-line custom-made piece. Ariel clarified that while it was top-tier, it was only by first-year student standards. It was never built to handle the sheer force Gray was now throwing around. Gray unsheathed his blade, and there they were, tiny chips and stress fractures already scarring the steel. Just as she'd said, his current power level could shatter this thing to pieces. Ariel chuckled. "No need to look so glum. I'm about to take you to my personal vault. You can pick out a weapon that's actually on your level." The Sword Saint's eyebrows shot up. "You're seriously letting him choose from there?" Ariel just waved a dismissive hand. "It's fine. After everything he's done, Gray has more than earned it." She raised her hand and sliced it through thin air. A split second later, a blinding azure light erupted from the gesture. Gray could only stare dumbfounded, as a shimmering portal materialized right before them. Ariel glanced back, a playful smile on her face. "Well, Gray, don't just stand there gawking. Get in there and pick your new partner." The second he stepped through the scene that greeted him stole his breath away. Glimmering mountains of gold coins, strange otherworldly blueprints, and a treasure hoard so massive. It represented wealth beyond the wildest dreams of entire dynasties. And now, he was about to choose a legendary weapon from this very collection. The vault was so colossal that even Ariel seemed to lose her bearings for a moment, trying to remember where the armory was. Gray was completely frozen, just trying to process the spectacle. The Sword Saint's voice rumbled beside him. "Your mission today is simple. You choose a sword." He told Gray not to be shy, to pick the absolute best one he could find. An opportunity like this only comes once in a lifetime. Surrounded by an arsenal of masterpieces, Gray was completely lost. Ariel gave a small laugh. "Sometimes having too many options is a curse, isn't it? Ideally, I'd have you test every single one of these at full strength, but with your kind of output, we can probably only manage one test per day. So let's make a short list." She walked over and plucked the sharpest-looking blade from its rack. "Let's start with this one." The instant Gray's fingers wrapped around the hilt, he knew something was wrong. The balance was off, its weight was immense, and it absolutely tanked his agility. Ariel already knew that would be an issue, but she also knew its destructive power was off the charts. With a snap of her fingers, a thick wooden practice dummy materialized in front of him. He swung the massive sword in a powerful arc, and with a sound like thunder, the dummy exploded into splinters. The blade was every bit as savage as Ariel had implied. Gray was floored. He had never held anything with such a wicked edge. Still, both Ariel and the Sword Saint could tell it wasn't a perfect match, even if its raw power was absolutely insane. But in a real fight, a weapon that big could be a liability. A blade's sharpness means nothing if you can't even hit your mark. Gray saw it differently, though. For taking down massive, slow-moving targets like divine beasts or even buildings, it could be the ultimate game-changer. Ariel tells him to chill out, saying she'll even throw in a magic storage pouch so he can carry it around. That way the sword's size wouldn't be an issue. But Gray had to ask, "Yo, this sword. This isn't just some random freebie, is it?" Ariel just laughs. "What are you on about? This thing's just been collecting dust in a corner. Wouldn't it be better in the hands of someone who'll actually use it? Besides, when you go up against the masterminds pulling Varian strings, the ones who are really summoning the Purger, are you absolutely certain you won't wish you had this?" And damn, when he thought about it like that, Gray knew she had a point. Being here or not, training their asses off, none of it would make a difference without the right gear. Realizing this, he finally took the sword and gave her a genuine thank you. But then the Sword Saint steps in with a warning. "Unless you're actually planning to swing that thing in a fight, I'd advise against flashing it around." Gray was totally confused by that, so the Sword Saint broke it down for him. If that thing ever hit the auction block, it would fetch a minimum of 10 billion. We're talking at least 10,000 gold coins. The sheer number left Gray's jaw on the floor. He'd never even heard of a price tag that insane. He couldn't wrap his head around Ariel just handing over something that valuable. So casually. He immediately tried to give it back, but she shut him down hard. "Nope, no take-backsies, especially once it's been handled." Seeing the look on his face, Ariel just lost it laughing. "Look, if I say it's yours, it's yours. End of story. That way you won't get all hesitant when you actually need to use it." Gray's gut told him she had to be messing with him, but Ariel's expression turned dead serious. I never joke. If spending 10 billion guarantees the safety of the God's Eye admission ticket, I'd consider it a bargain. Think of this sword as your payment. Gray was still tripping over a gift this massive. Ariel just raised an eyebrow. What are you trying to say? That a measly 10 billion isn't even worth my time? You really think my reputation is that cheap? That finally did it. Gray cracked a smile, accepted the sword, and promised he'd treat it right. Only then did a satisfied smirk spread across Ariel's face. Anyway, she said, we've got plenty of standard-issue swords for your everyday fights. Come on, let's have a look. Gray was not prepared for how insane Ariel's armory was. Standing next to him, the Sword Saint just sighed. In this entire world, nobody has an eye for value like God's Eye Ariel. To put it another way, her vision literally prints money. Ariel then turned to the Sword Saint. As his mentor, which one do you think would be the best fit for him? The Sword Saint started sizing up the collection, his eyes scanning every blade. It didn't take long for his gaze to lock onto a sword with a golden hilt. Gray, give this one a shot. See how it feels in your hand. Gray took the blade and gave it a thorough once-over. He whipped it through the air with a sharp whoosh, and the feeling was unreal. The weapon felt impossibly light in his grip. He followed up with a few more practice swings, the blade slicing through the air with a clean, satisfying whistle. After more than 20 swings back-to-back, the sword started to feel like an extension of his arm. It was clearly a masterfully forged weapon, but something just felt off. Was he just not used to it yet? The Sword Saint, who'd been watching the whole time, finally spoke. It's not a match for you. Try another one. He stepped to the side. This next one was a prototype made for testing. It might be more your speed. Tilting his head, he gestured towards it. I have a feeling you'll like this one. The moment Gray laid eyes on the blade, he froze solid for a good 2 seconds. There was something about it that just pulled him in. The second the Sword Saint pointed it out, Gray was captivated. This weapon was on another level. The Sword Saint urged him, go on, pick it up, get a feel for it. The instant Gray's fingers wrapped around the hilt, his eyes went wide. It was way lighter than he'd braced for. And he immediately noticed something else was off. The blade had no edge. It was completely dull. The Sword Saint then explained, this sword was built to test a new kind of tech. It was never meant for actual fighting. It's basically a blunt slab of metal, but it's ridiculously tough. Gray, this one. This might actually be the one for you. Gray processed this for a second, then asked, so, are you saying that with my current level of power, I don't even need a sharp edge? The Sword Saint nodded. Precisely. I honestly doubt any blade out there, no matter how well made, could actually handle the sheer force you put out. He looked Gray up and down. And if you keep getting stronger, then eventually every single sword in this room will just hold you back instead of helping you. If that's the case, wouldn't it be better to aim for a future where the edge of your sword is completely irrelevant to how you fight? After a beat, Gray slowly passed the sword back, and in the very next moment, the Sword Saint struck. With a single effortless motion, he cleaved a solid iron post clean in two. This was the true power of the Sword Saint. But it didn't stop there. Just moments later, the sundered metal began to distort, melting down into a puddle of what looked like wet cement. Gray was absolutely floored. This wasn't just cutting through steel. This was complete and utter annihilation. Ariel let out a sigh. You're just flexing at this point, aren't you? She grumbled. Personally, I still think Gray should stick with a real sword. But hey, a little test run can't hurt. She then asked, anything else catch your eye? If you're curious about weapons that aren't swords, I can give you a tour of the other sections. Gray scanned the room and just shook his head. I'm good. There are way too many weapons in here. Trying them all out. Testing them one by one was a total waste of training time, so he figured he'd check out a couple more before bouncing. His gaze landed on a crimson blade. It looked lighter than the first one, but way sturdier. Gray started moving towards it, but then he froze his attention, suddenly snagged by something else. He spotted something different. Looking up, he saw a slender white sword, long and impossibly thin. The weirdest part was the insane sense of déjà vu. He swore he'd seen it somewhere before. He turned to Ariel. Yo, what's the story with this sword? Ariel paused for a beat. Oh, that. Some old student left it behind after graduating. It's not some legendary artifact, but it's exceptionally well made. That answer just made Gray even more hyped to try it for himself. He reached out, and the second his fingers wrapped around the hilt, it felt perfect. Like the sword was molded specifically for his hand. He strolled over to a wooden training post and gave the blade a little flick. In the next heartbeat, he swung down with everything he had, splitting the post cleanly in half. The clean slice left even Ariel and the Sword Saint completely stunned. Gray himself was ecstatic. He never dreamed a weapon could sync with him so perfectly. It felt like he'd been training with this exact blade since the day he was born. The familiarity was practically coded into his DNA. Ariel burst out laughing as she walked over. Looks like you really vibe with that sword, Gray. Gray just nodded, a massive grin on his face. Staring at the blade, his voice was low, but he couldn't hide his excitement. It was without a doubt the best-fitting sword he had ever held in his entire life. Ariel just waved a hand. Then get to it. Let's see if it can actually handle your power. That gave Gray pause. Wait, didn't you say one of your students left this here? What if I break it? Ariel just shook her head. Don't sweat it. I guarantee this sword would rather be in your hands than just collecting dust on a rack. MG, 16. When he thought about it, she was right. No blade wants to be forgotten in some vault. He had to ask, so who was the alum who forged this thing? Ariel replied, his name was Metallum. The moment that name hit his ears, Gray went rigid. Oh, he knew that name. Metallum Noralam, the absolute greatest magic swordsmith in history. A prodigy they called the Blade Breaker. He couldn't believe this was one of his creations. After that revelation, they bailed on the vault. For today, all focus was on this one sword. Ariel smiled. To really test its strength and durability, I need you to push this thing to its absolute limit. She handed the weapon back to Gray, and seeing how chill she was, a weird little flutter echoed in his chest. Before he could move, Ariel added, we'll start with this super unique sword, and see how your power reacts to it. Gray squared up to the wooden post again. He slowly closed his eyes, pulling on that strange hidden power inside him. That familiar red energy instantly flared to life across his body, a power he could now summon on command. But the second he opened his eyes, the energy he'd gathered just fizzled out. Gray frowned. That had never ever happened before. He glanced down at the blade. Give me a sec, I'm trying that again. He focused his power once more, forcing it to wrap around the sword. In his head, he chanted the same words over and over. I am the sword. My power will merge with it. But it was no use. The same thing happened. The sword itself was literally repelling his energy. Total confusion washed over him. Why wouldn't his power stick to the blade? Sensing the problem, Ariel stepped in. Gray, do you feel anything weird inside your body? But he felt completely normal. Ariel thought for a moment. If that's the case, then the problem has to be the sword. Let's just put it aside and grab another one, she said gently. Maybe it just doesn't vibe with your specific type of power. So don't get down about it. Ariel pulled out the storage pouch at her waist. If that's how it is, let's try the most basic sword we have this time. Her eyes narrowed with focus as a new blade materialized from her hand. Try this one. I'm positive you'll be surprised. The moment Gray took Ariel's sword, he steeled himself silently, repeating that he was a singular blade. He was dead set on becoming one with this weapon. Bit by bit, that mysterious power began to bleed out along the sword. A split second later, red energy exploded around his entire body, and this time, it didn't vanish. Gray let out a small laugh. So it worked. Guess the last sword really was the issue. Just then, his eyes snapped wide as a voice echoed deep inside his mind. While there's still time. The random words froze him on the spot. He glanced at Ariel and the Sword Saint, but they showed no reaction at all. He was the only one who heard it. The cryptic voice spoke again, but its meaning was a total mystery to him. From behind them, the Sword Saint nodded in satisfaction. Getting a sword to contain and channel Gray's power was no longer a problem. Gray then shot forward, charging solo into the formation of practice puppets. In a blink, his entire body vanished from sight. With a vicious slash, his blade tore right through an armored target. Checking the damage Gray saw, the power output was pretty much the same as before, but the movements felt way smoother. Another strike landed, cleaving through armor like butter. Again, the incredible fluidity made every swing feel completely effortless. His body felt impossibly light. With one jump, he soared across a huge distance. Boom, boom, boom. Moving and striking as one, Gray decimated dozens of armored puppets in just a few heartbeats. His sword aura pulsed out like a death sensor, and any armor it touched was instantly sliced apart. The spectacle left every professor there, absolutely floored. This was a whole different league of speed. From a distance, Gray's form had totally vanished. All that was left was a chaotic web of crimson light tearing through the air. It was like he was flying completely untethered. Pushing himself to the absolute limit, a sharp clang rang out as another slash sent an armored head flying. His focus intensified, ready to push the envelope even further. He was about to test his true speed limit, but then he just stopped cold. Every single target ahead of him was already obliterated. That genuinely caught him off guard. The objective was finished, but it felt like no time had passed. He scanned the entire area. It was the same number of targets as before, but in the same window of time, his speed had literally more than doubled. Normally, he would have only cleared half the field. Now he'd annihilated them all. Watching from the sidelines, Ariel's mind was racing. She yelled out to Gray but got nothing back. A sudden tension filled the air. Why was he just standing there, not moving a muscle? A feeling of dread creeping in. Ariel screamed at him. Gray, can you hear me? The instant she finished speaking, the sword slipped from Gray's grasp and clattered to the dirt. He suddenly coughed up a spray of blood, his body folding forward uncontrollably. The professors didn't hesitate for a second, unleashing a torrent of healing magic in a desperate bid to keep Gray stable. A powerful surge of restorative energy enveloped his body, allowing him to struggle back to his feet. But even so, his entire body felt like lead. The whole situation was messing with his head. It hadn't been anywhere near as intense as the last time. So why did his muscles refuse to fire? The Sword Saint warned him not to push it, telling him it was time to fall back. Ariel sized up the situation. Even with healing magic, she stated, losing that much blood is going to absolutely tank your stamina. You need to recover. The Sword Saint then noted that Gray had somehow shattered a limit he shouldn't have been able to touch. It was a good thing, but not something to be forced. Ariel then knelt, scooping up the longsword and adding, pulling a stunt like that without a dedicated healer in a real fight is a death sentence. She gave the weapon a test swing before her god's eye flared to life, meticulously scanning its condition. Ariel's eyes went wide. After a trial that brutal, the blade was completely impossibly pristine, not a single scratch. This thing was a genuine treasure. Whoever the student was that ditched this sword, they were on another level entirely. But what really bothered her was the blade's aura. It felt brighter than before. Was she just seeing things? Or could this be a weapon that actually levels up? Ariel peered into the steel's reflection, and the longer she gazed, the more a pit grew in her stomach. Something felt deeply wrong. A split second later, she whipped around her stare, locking onto the horizon. She felt it. Unmistakable killing intent. Professor, what is it? Gray asked, confused. At that exact instant, a cataclysmic explosion detonated from the direction of the school buildings. The shockwave blasted past them violently, whipping Ariel's hair through the air. Both Gray and the Sword Saint were frozen in shock at the spectacle. What in the hell was happening? A second earth-shattering boom erupted as massive chunks of debris rained down right in front of them. Gazing upward, they saw the entire facade of the World United Academy, already consumed by a maelstrom of smoke and fire. Students were sprinting for their lives in a full-blown panic, sheer terror carved onto their faces. A few instructors were already casting barrier spells, their top priority being to shield the students closest to the blast. The raw chaos left Gray completely stunned. It all happened in the blink of an eye. The Sword Saint spoke, his voice low and grave. That's the location of the Academy's hazardous materials vault. It wasn't long before Gray spotted an eerie crimson flame raging inside the smoldering ruins. This explosion was no accident. As the metal framework buckled, the Sword Saint's sharp eyes caught the shimmering residue of teleportation magic. Are they seriously trying to raid the Academy's main headquarters? One of the other professors immediately shot the idea down. That's impossible. The vault walls are reinforced with powerful anti-teleportation wards capable of nullifying most explosive spells. But Ariel understood the terrifying reality. Woven into the smoke, she could sense the foul energy of a purger. Hearing that name sent a chill down Gray's spine. With a grim expression, Ariel explained that the attackers must have used special crystals, the kind made in the underground labs, to blast through the outer walls. And the anti-teleportation field, she finished. At that moment, Gray's calm finally shattered. The people behind this attack, they had to be Varian's crew. They actually had the nerve to attack the Academy itself. Down on the ground, students fled in a desperate stampede, while others were instantly obliterated by the devastating aftershocks. The World United Academy's darkest hour had just begun.